Hello, and welcome back. This Scary Stories channel features psychological and mind-bending horror, where the fear is quiet but persistent. If you enjoy listening, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Settle in. Story 1. I remember dying, but everyone says I'm fine. The shower water should have been hot, scalding, enough to burn the memory of ice water out of my bones. But it wasn't. It ran lukewarm and thin from the faucet, the same weak pressure that had plagued this apartment since I moved in after Clara left. I stood under it shivering, scrubbing my arms raw. My left forearm wouldn't clean. No matter how hard I scrubbed, how much soap I used, the skin remained stained a faint watery blue, like drowned flesh. And when the steam thickened, curling around me like grave mist, I could still feel it. The crushing weight of the river current, the shocking cold as it filled my mouth, the desperate flail of my legs against the muddy bottom as my lungs burned. I remembered the exact moment the world went silent, the bubbles rising past my face, silver and fragile, the streetlights above the water's surface, blurred and distant like stars in a dream. The thought that cut through the panic, sharp and final. This is how I die. I turned off the water. The dripping echoed in the tiny bathroom. I toweled off slowly, avoiding the mirror. I didn't need to see the hollows under my eyes, the grayish pallor that clung to my skin no matter how much I slept. I knew what was there. I dressed in the bedroom, pulling on clean sweatpants and a t-shirt. The blue stain on my forearm had faded to a ghostly watermark, barely visible, just like the memory everyone insisted wasn't real. Downstairs, Mrs. Gable was feeding pigeons on her stoop. Her laundromat smelled of damp cotton and industrial soap. She beamed when she saw me. "Eli, you look better today. Color in your cheeks." Her eyes were sharp behind her thick glasses, missing nothing. The tremor in my hands, the way I gripped the railing too tightly. I forced a smile. "Just tired, Mrs. Gable? Bad dreams." She patted my arm. "Honey, you haven't slept at all since that little tumble last week. Finch said you slipped on the fire escape, hit your head something awful. Lucky you landed in the bushes." Her voice dropped, conspiratorial. "Heard the ambulance sirens myself, scared the daylights out of me, but you bounced back quick, like a cat." She chuckled, offering me a stale cookie from her pocket. "No broken bones, no concussion. Doctor said it was a miracle." I took the cookie, nodded. A miracle. The word tasted like river mud. I hadn't slipped on the fire escape. I'd jumped, or rather, he had jumped. The man who lived in this body before the water took him, before I woke up in the hospital bed, tubes in my arms, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging my nose, and a doctor with calm eyes telling me, "You're safe now, Mr. Vance. You fell, but you're fine, perfectly fine." I'd known it was a lie before the words were fully out. The memories weren't of falling. They were of sinking, of giving up, of the river pulling me down into its cold, dark embrace, while the city lights glittered like indifferent stars above. I walked to work. Data Key Solutions. Cubicle 4B. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sound that used to be background noise. Now it felt like the river's roar, muffled but insistent. Brenda from HR intercepted me at the coffee machine. "Eli, glad you're back. We've all been so worried." Her smile was perfect, professional. Her eyes flickered over my face, cataloging. "Dr. Evans called this morning. He's pleased with your progress. Said the dissociative episode was severe, but the new meds are working. She slid a manila folder across the counter. My employee file opened to a page stamped. Medical leave. Approved. Dates circled October 12th to October 19th. Today was October 20th. Just a fall, sweetie, she repeated, her voice syrupy with concern. You blacked out. Hit your head. It's understandable you'd have some vivid dreams. Trauma does that. She patted my hand. Her touch was warm, real. But the memory of icy water closing over my head was more real. I remembered the weight of my soaked clothes dragging me down, the panic as my foot snagged on a submerged branch. The last thought before the darkness took me, let go. It's easier to let go. I spent the day inputting insurance claims. Numbers blurred on the screen. Every time I blinked, I saw bubbles rising. The coppery taste of fear flooded my mouth. At lunch, Mark from accounting slid into the booth across from me in the break room. Dude, you okay? You look like hell. I stared at my sandwich, turkey and avocado on rye. Clara's favorite. I hadn't eaten avocado in years. I remember dying, Mark, I said quietly, the words scraping my throat raw. In the river, last Tuesday night, I jumped off the bridge. Mark's smile froze. Then it crumpled into pity. Whoa, heavy. Finch told us you had a bad fall off the fire escape. Concussion, maybe? Dr. Evans said, I didn't fall off the fire escape. The words came out too loud. Heads turned. Mark leaned in, voice low, urgent. Eli, listen. Finch called the cops. They found you curled up at the base of the Sycamore Street Bridge at 3 a.m. You were dry. Your shoes were clean. No mud, no river smell. Just confused, shaken, talking about water. He squeezed my arm. The river's 3 blocks away, the bridge railing's 8 feet high. You'd have broken bones. You have nothing, not a scratch. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, slid it toward me. A photo. Me, sitting on a gurney under the bridge lights. My clothes were dry. My hair was neatly combed. My face was pale, terrified but unmarked. No water in my clothes, no mud on my shoes, just Eli Vance looking lost. See? You were never in the water. It was a nightmare, a bad one, but it wasn't real. I stared at the photo. My own face stared back, hollow-eyed, yes, but dry, unharmed. The blue stain on my forearm was hidden under my sleeve. I remembered the cold metal of the gurney under my palms. I remembered the EMT's voice. Easy now. You're safe. Just a fall. But I also remembered the water filling my lungs. The two memories clashed like broken glass in my skull. Which was the dream? The dry gurney under the bridge lights, or the suffocating dark of the river bottom? The copper taste surged back, thick and metallic. I pushed the phone away. I remember the cold, I whispered. I remember the bubbles. Mark's expression hardened. Dr. Evans says that's the dissociation talking, the brain protecting itself from the trauma of the fall, creating a narrative to explain the fear. He stood up, gathering his lunch. Get checked again, Eli, seriously. This isn't healthy. You're scaring people. He walked away. The break room chatter resumed, but glances thrown my way were different now, warier, pitying. I saw Brenda watching from her office doorway. Her smile was tight, professional. She made a small, deliberate motion with her finger against her temple. Crazy. I left work early. The city streets felt alien, too bright, too loud. The roar of buses, the shriek of brakes, the blare of car horns, it all blurred into the sound of rushing water. I found myself walking toward the river, not the Sycamore Street bridge where they'd found me dry, the old stone footbridge near the botanical gardens, where I'd jumped, where I'd died. The afternoon sun glinted off the slow-moving water. Couples strolled hand in hand. Joggers panted past. No one looked twice at the man standing rigidly on the bridge, hands gripping the cold stone railing. I leaned out, looked down. The water was murky green, swirling around pilings crusted with riverweed. I could see the reflection of the sky, fractured and rippling. And in that reflection, for a split second, I saw it, not my own face, but face bloated and pale, waterlogged, eyes wide and white like stones, mouth open in a silent scream. It vanished as a barge chugged past, churning the water into froth. I stumbled back, gasping. A young woman walking a golden retriever glanced at me, frowning. "You okay, mister?" Her dog whined, pulling toward the railing, hackles raised, staring at the spot where I'd seen the face. I ran, not home, to St. Vincent's Hospital. The ER waiting room smelled of bleach and despair. I waited 2 hours, my leg bouncing uncontrollably. When the young resident finally called my name, I blurted it out before he could sit down. I died last Tuesday in the river, under the Sycamore Street Bridge. I remember it, the cold, the bubbles, the silence. I rolled up my sleeve, showing him the faint blue stain on my forearm. "See? Drowned flesh. It won't wash off." The resident, Dr. Chen, didn't flinch. He examined the stain with calm professionalism. "Interesting discoloration," he murmured, pressing it lightly. "Looks like a mild bruise, or possibly a reaction to laundry detergent, common in cheap apartments with old pipes." He pulled up my chart on his tablet. "Mr. Vance, your records are clear. You presented to the ER last Tuesday night after a fall from your fire escape, approximately 8 feet. You sustained a minor scalp laceration and a bruised wrist. No fractures, no signs of submersion, no hypothermia, your clothes were dry, your core temperature was normal." He swiveled the tablet toward me. Scans, X-rays, a CT scan of my head, all pristine, no trauma, no water in the lungs, no residue of river sediment under my nails. Nothing. Just Eli Vance, 32, with a minor head injury and a story no one believed. "Dr. Evans has you on a low-dose antipsychotic for the dissociative episodes," Dr. Chen continued gently. "He believes the fall triggered a stress response. Your brain created a detailed, immersive fantasy to cope with the fear of falling. It's not uncommon. The blue mark, likely residual bruising from when you hit the ground. It'll fade." "But I remember the water," I insisted, my voice cracking. "I remember letting go. I remember the light fading." "You remember a dream," he corrected, his tone kind but firm. "A very vivid, traumatic dream. Your brain conflated the fear of falling with the fear of drowning. It's a protective mechanism." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're not crazy, Eli. You're healing. Trust the process. Trust the facts." He wrote a new prescription, stronger antipsychotics, and patted my back as he ushered me out. "Go home. Rest. Talk to Dr. Evans tomorrow." The sliding glass doors hissed shut behind me, sealing me out of the sterile, factual world. The river's roar filled my ears again. I looked down at my forearm. The blue stain seemed darker in a harsh afternoon light, like a fingerprint left by the dead. Dr. Evans's office was all beige carpet and framed motivational quotes. "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. I sat rigidly in the plush chair, staring at the Rorschach blot on his desk. He listened quietly as I described the river, the bubbles, the face in the water. He took notes, nodded thoughtfully. "The persistence of the memory is significant, Eli," he said finally, steepling his fingers. "But persistence doesn't equal reality. Our brains are remarkable storytellers. After trauma, they weave narratives to make sense of the senseless. Your fall was terrifying. Your subconscious reached for the most primal fear it could find: drowning. It's not uncommon for near-death experiences, even imagined ones, to feel hyper-real." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Here's what we know for certain. You were found dry under the Sycamore Street Bridge. Your physical exam showed 0 signs of submersion. Your medical records are consistent with a minor fall, not a near drowning. Your memories are inconsistent with the physical evidence. Therefore, the memories are unreliable." He slid a brochure across the desk. "Understanding Dissociative Amnesia. Reclaiming Your Narrative. The medication will help quiet the intrusive thoughts. Give it time. And Eli, stop going to the river. Avoid triggers. Your mind needs safety to heal." I took the brochure, didn't read it, walked home in a daze. The streets felt tilted, unreal, like a stage set. I passed a newsstand. The headline screamed, "Mysterious Death in River, Body Found Near Sycamore Street Bridge." My blood froze. I grabbed the paper. October 19th, yesterday. A young man, mid-30s, no ID, found tangled in debris near the pilings, cause of death, drowning. Time of death estimated 2:00 a.m. to 4 a.m. Tuesday night. My night. I fumbled for coins, bought the paper, my hands shaking so badly I tore the pages. I hurried home, locking the door behind me, drawing the curtains. I spread the paper on the kitchen table. The grainy photo of the recovered body, bloated, face obscured by riverweed, sent a jolt through me. Not my face, a stranger's. But the clothes, waterlogged jeans, a dark hoodie. It could have been me. The article mentioned a witness, an elderly man walking his dog at 3 a.m. who saw a tall figure jump but couldn't identify them in the dark. The police were treating it as suicide. No foul play suspected. I sank to the floor. The newspaper crumpled in my lap. The blue stain on my forearm pulsed faintly, cold against my skin. The copper taste flooded my mouth. This was proof. This was the truth. I died. This other man, this John Doe, had died instead. Or I was John Doe, stolen from the river, dumped dry on the bridge, given Eli Vance's life like a hand-me-down coat that didn't quite fit. The apartment felt suffocating. The peeling wallpaper seemed to breathe. The old pipes groaned like a dying thing. I needed air. I needed to see the bridge. Now I ran, ignoring the ache in my chest that wasn't there before, the strange lightness in my limbs. The city blurred past. At the Sycamore Street Bridge, police tape fluttered in the breeze, cordoning off a section near the railing. 2 cops stood guard, bored. I approached cautiously. "Excuse me, I think I might have seen something the night that man died." One cop, a heavy-set man with a mustache, eyed me. "You with the media? We're not giving interviews." "No, I live nearby. I saw a guy jump Tuesday night around 3 a.m. The cop's partner, younger, leaned in. "Yeah? What did he look like?" "Tall," I said, my voice tight. "Wearing a dark hoodie, he just climbed over and let go. No hesitation." The young cop exchanged a glance with his partner. The older one sighed. Look, pal, we got that report. From an old guy walking his poodle. Said the same thing. But here's the thing. He pointed to the railing. No scuff marks. No fibers caught on the metal. No witness saw anyone approach the bridge that night on the cameras. He gestured to a small weatherproof camera mounted on a lamppost. We checked, clear, from midnight to 5 a.m. No one came near this railing except the old man and his dog. And you, he tapped his notebook. You, Eli Vance, found sitting right here at 3:17 a.m., dry as a bone, babbling about a jump you didn't take. Security footage confirms it. You were alone. You never went near the railing. He closed his notebook with a snap. Grief does funny things. That John Doe, he was your neighbor, wasn't he? Apartment 3B, 2 floors down. Real quiet guy. Worked nights. You probably barely knew him, but losing someone close, it messes with your head. Makes you see things. Makes you feel things that aren't yours. He put a firm hand on my shoulder. Go home, son. Take your meds. Let the dead rest. I walked away, numb. Apartment 3B? I'd never noticed who lived there. Had I seen him in the hall? At the mailboxes? His face in the newspaper was a stranger's, but the blue stain on my arm burned cold. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights cast long, shifting shadows on the wall. The shadows looked wrong, thicker, hungrier. At 2:17 a.m., the time the cop said I was found on the bridge, the shadows in the corner of my room detached. Not my shadow, something else. A deeper darkness, coalescing into a shape, tall, thin, dripping. It didn't move toward me. It pointed, not at me, at the closet. Its form was indistinct, wavering like heat haze, but the finger was clear, accusing. I stood slowly, my heart hammering against ribs that felt too fragile. I opened the closet. Nothing, just coats. I pushed them aside, and there, behind my winter parka, taped to the back wall, was a small waterproof bag. I hadn't put it there. I tore it open. Inside was a wallet. Waterlogged, swollen. The ID photo showed a man with my eyes, my jawline, but not my face. His name, Daniel Shaw. Address, Apartment 3B, 17 Sycamore Street, the John Doe from the river. Tucked behind the ID was a folded piece of paper. My own handwriting covered it, jagged and frantic. I took his place. The water gave him to me. It wanted a life. I offered mine. It took his instead. I am not Eli Vance. I am the space where he drowned. I remember the bubbles. I remember the letting go. They call it a miracle. It was a theft. Burn this. Forget. But I can't forget the cold. I can't forget the light fading. They say I'm fine. I am not fine. I am Daniel Shaw's ghost wearing Eli's skin. The river is in my bones. It is always hungry. I dropped the note. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. The dripping shadow was gone. Only moonlight pooled on the floorboards. I sank to my knees, the wallet clutched in my hand. Daniel Shaw's face smiled up at me from the ID, a life cut short, a life I'd stolen. The blue stain on my forearm was a deep, unnatural indigo now spreading like a bruise toward my elbow. The copper taste was a river in my mouth. I remembered, not just the drowning, the bargain. Standing on the bridge, the river whispering up through the cracks in the concrete, a voice like wet stones grinding. Together, one life for another, your pain for his peace, jump, and we will give you back the life you lost. Clara's face swam in my mind, her laughter, the scent of her hair, the warmth of her hand in mine, the loneliness that had hollowed me out after she left. I'd stepped onto the railing, closed my eyes. Take me, give me back what I lost. The cold hit, the current pulled, and in the dark water, something cold and ancient wrapped around my ankles, not to drag me down, but to push. I broke the surface gasping, not on the riverbank, but dry and shivering at the base of the Sycamore Street Bridge. Eli Vance's life flooded back into me, his memories, his apartment, his job. But beneath them, like a deep, cold current, flowed Daniel Shaw's final moments. The river hadn't given me back my life. It had given me his, and it was still hungry. I called Dr. Evans at 3 a.m. His voicemail was full. I called Brenda, straight to voicemail. I called Mark. Same. I sat on the floor, Daniel Shaw's wallet in my lap, the note crumpled in my fist. The street lights outside flickered, died. The apartment plunged into darkness. Only the glow of the digital clock on the stove, 3:17 a.m., the time I was found, the time Daniel Shaw died. The shadows in the corners deepened. Not one shadow, many, dozens, thin, dripping shapes, coalescing from the gloom. They didn't point. They reached. Cold, watery fingers brushed my skin. The whisper filled the room, not in my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. He is not yours, give him back. The bargain was for one. You took two. The river is hungry. I scrambled back, hitting the wall. I didn't know. I just wanted to stop hurting. The pain is the price. The voices hissed, a chorus of wet echoes. You stole his rest. Now you will rest in the deep places where the light does not reach. The shadows surged forward, not to touch me, to become me. I felt them seeping into my skin, my bones, my breath. The blue stain on my arm spread like ink and water, swallowing my hand, my wrist. The copper taste became the taste of mud and decay. I remembered Daniel Shaw's last thought, not fear, but relief. Relief at the cold. Relief at the silence. Relief at the letting go. And I understood. The river didn't want Daniel Shaw back. It wanted me. It wanted the life I'd stolen. It wanted the pain I'd tried to bury. It wanted the space where Eli Vance had drowned his grief, and Daniel Shaw had drowned his life. It wanted the hollow place inside me. I stopped fighting. Let the cold fill me. Let the shadows pull me down. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was my own hand, raised in surrender. The blue stain was gone. My skin was pale, unmarked, clean, and on the floor where I'd been sitting, Daniel Shaw's wallet lay open. His ID photo smiled up, peaceful, at peace. The note was gone. Only a single waterlogged maple leaf rested beside the wallet. Out of season, out of place, glistening with river water. Outside, the streetlights flickered back on. Dawn bled gray over the city. In the apartment above Mrs. Gable's laundromat, the shower ran. Lukewarm water streamed down the tiles. A man stood beneath it, scrubbing his arms. His left forearm was perfectly clean, unblemished. He turned off the water, dried himself, dressed. He walked downstairs, nodding to Mrs. Gable on her stoop. "Morning, Mrs. Gable. Beautiful day." His voice was calm, steady. He walked to Data Key Solutions, Cubicle 4B. He input insurance claims with quiet efficiency. At lunch, Mark from accounting joined him. "Rough night?" Mark asked, eyeing the dark circles under the man's eyes. The man smiled, a warm, easy smile. "Just dreams. Dr. Evans says they'll fade." He took a bite of his turkey and avocado sandwich, Clara's favorite. He didn't notice the faint scent of river water that clung to his skin. He didn't feel the cold spot in his chest where a heart should beat. He didn't see the shadow that followed him, a shadow that didn't quite match his shape, a shadow that dripped faintly on the linoleum floor, a shadow that pointed not at the world, but at the hollow place inside his own chest. He was fine. Perfectly fine. The doctor said so. The records proved it. The river had taken its due, and the man who remembered dying, he was finally at rest, deep in the cold, dark water where the light never reached, where the bubbles rose like silver prayers and the silence was a blanket. The apartment was quiet, the shadows were still, and on the kitchen table, untouched, sat a new prescription bottle. The label read, Eli Vance, take one daily for dissociative episodes. The pills inside were untouched, unneeded. The man didn't need them anymore. He remembered nothing. He was fine. He was home. He was empty. The river had won, and the thing wearing Eli Vance's skin smiled, tasting the copper on its tongue, and reached for another bite of sandwich. The hunger was quiet now, but it was never gone. It was only waiting for the next life, the next bargain, the next hollow place to fill. The shadow on the wall didn't move. It didn't need to. It was already inside, already home, already hungry. The silence in the apartment wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of the deep water, the silence after the last bubble rises, the silence of a life stolen and a life given back, empty, perfect, and utterly, terrifyingly fine. And with that, this story comes to an end. Let's move on to the next one. My wife died 3 years ago. She just texted me, I'm home. The text arrived at 11:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, a night so ordinary it was practically invisible. I was in my usual state of suspended animation, half sprawled on the sofa, the bluish, flickering light of a forgotten documentary on the television painting the room in shifting, melancholic hues. My name is Daniel, and for the past 195 nights, not that I was counting, my life had been a meticulously curated museum of grief. Each object in our small 2-bedroom house was a relic, a testament to the vibrant, chaotic, and now deafeningly silent life I had shared with my wife, Clara. The half-finished novel on her bedside table, the ridiculously oversized coffee mug she'd loved, the faint, phantom scent of her jasmine perfume that I could still sometimes catch in the hallway closet. These were the ghosts I had chosen to live with. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, a jarring, intrusive sound in the quiet. I glanced at the screen, expecting a late-night work email or a spam message about an extended car warranty, but the name that glowed in the darkness was a ghost of a different kind. It was a name I hadn't seen on my screen in 3 years. Clara. My heart, a sluggish, hibernating thing, gave a sudden, hard, painful jolt like an engine seizing and then violently restarting. It was an old contact, a digital ghost I hadn't had the strength to delete. It was a pocket dial from her mother, perhaps, who still had her old phone. A cruel, random glitch in the matrix. I was about to dismiss it, to toss the phone back onto the table, when I saw the message preview. 2 words, 2 simple, impossible, and utterly soul-shattering words. I'm home. I stared at the screen, the world narrowing to the small, glowing rectangle in my hand. The air in the room grew thin and sharp. The sound from the television faded into a dull, meaningless roar. I read the words again and again. They did not change. They did not disappear. My first thought was a desperate, grasping lunge for a rational explanation, a sick prank. Someone had gotten a hold of her old number. It was a new feature of the phone company, reassigning dormant numbers. some stranger, a teenager with a cruel sense of humor, was messing with me. It was a vile, disgusting thing to do, but it was logical. It was explainable. With a trembling thumb, I opened the message thread. The last message I had sent to her 3 years ago was still there, a heartbreaking digital monument to a conversation that would never be finished. Leaving the hospital now? Pick up some milk on your way home? Love you. She had never made it home. A drunk driver had run a red light a block from our house. Above that old sad message was the new one. I'm home. My fingers, clumsy and slick with a sudden cold sweat, typed out a reply. Who is this? I hit send. The message was delivered, and then the 3 little dots, the pulsing, electronic heartbeat of a reply in progress, appeared on the screen. The prankster was quick. The reply came a moment later. It was a single, devastating word. Clara. I was expecting a laugh, an admission, an insult. Not this calm, simple, impossible assertion. My second thought, the one that slithered in after the rational explanation had been shot down, was that I was losing my mind, that the grief, the loneliness, the sheer crushing weight of the last 3 years had finally fractured my sanity. I was hallucinating. This wasn't real. I was having a psychotic break, and my brain, in a final act of desperate, self-destructive longing, had manifested this cruelest of all possible mirages. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I walked into the kitchen and splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it a welcome, grounding sensation. I looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. A pale, haggard, and decidedly sane-looking man stared back. I was not crazy. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Clara. I walked back to it. A man walking towards an execution he had inexplicably scheduled for himself. This message was longer. The key isn't working. The lock must be rusted. Can you let me in, Sleepyhead? Sleepyhead. It was her pet name for me, a gentle, teasing jab at my love of sleeping in on weekends. It was a detail, a small, intimate, and perfect detail that a random prankster could not possibly know. A wave of fear so profound it was almost nauseating washed over me. I looked at the front door. The deadbolt, which I had locked hours ago, was still firmly in place. I crept to the peephole, my heart a frantic trapped bird against my ribs. I put my eye to the cold brass ring and looked out. The porch was empty. The street beyond was silent and still, bathed in the fuzzy orange glow of the streetlights. There was no one there. My mind was a screaming chaos of impossible possibilities. Was this a ghost? A spirit? Somehow manipulating the digital world? Was this a test? A cruel, elaborate game being played by a god I no longer believed in? I typed another reply, my fingers fumbling on the small glass keys. This isn't funny. Stop it. The 3 dots appeared immediately. The reply was instantaneous. Why are you being so weird, Danny? It's cold out here. Just open the door. Danny, not Daniel. Only she had ever called me that. Another detail. Another perfect, tiny, and impossibly real nail in the coffin of my sanity. And then I heard it. A sound from outside. A soft, hesitant 3-beat knock on the front door. Knock, knock, knock. I stumbled back from the door, a choked, guttural cry of pure terror escaping my lips. This was not a digital ghost. This was not a prank. This was real. There was someone or something on my porch, and it knew the things that only my dead wife could know. I didn't answer the door. I ran upstairs, my breath coming in ragged, painful sobs. I locked myself in the bedroom, the room that was still so full of her, and I wedged a chair under the doorknob. I huddled on the bed, my phone clutched in my hand, a useless, terrifying tether to the nightmare that was unfolding. The messages continued. "Is everything okay? You're scaring me. Danny, please, I just want to come home. I had a bad dream. I need you." Each message was a new, expertly targeted emotional missile, designed to bypass my fear and hit the raw, exposed nerve of my grief, my love, my protective instinct. It was a masterful, cruel, and deeply personal psychological assault. And then a new message appeared, one that finally, irrevocably, shattered my last desperate hope that this was some kind of elaborate terrestrial hoax. It was a picture, a photograph, taken just seconds ago. It was a selfie. It was a picture of Clara. But it was not the Clara I remembered. It was not the vibrant, laughing, sun-kissed woman from my memories. This was a pale, spectral, and terrifyingly changed version of her. She was standing on our porch, her face illuminated by the stark, unforgiving light of a phone screen. Her eyes were the same, a deep, beautiful cornflower blue. But they were wrong. They were empty. They held no light, no life, just a flat, placid, and deeply unsettling calm. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her hair, which had always been a wild, chaotic mane of auburn curls, was lank and dark, as if wet. And her smile, she was smiling, but it was a pained, unnatural stretching of her lips, a rictus of a smile that did not reach her dead, empty eyes. Behind her, I could see the familiar, reassuring details of my own front porch, the potted fern, the welcome mat, the small hairline crack in the porch light. It was her. It was my Clara. But it was a version of her that had been somewhere else, somewhere cold and dark and quiet, for a very, very long time. I stared at the picture, a low, keening sound of pure animal despair escaping my lips. The grief I had so carefully managed for 3 years, the grief I had compartmentalized, the grief I had learned to live with, came roaring back, a tidal wave of raw, unprocessed agony. It was not a prank. It was not a dream. It was my wife. And she had come back from the dead. The knocking started again, louder this time, more insistent, and her voice, a faint, muffled, and horrifyingly familiar sound, came through the thick wooden door. "Danny, please, let me in. I'm cold." I spent the rest of the night huddled in that room, a trembling, weeping mess, as the thing on my porch, the thing that wore my wife's face, alternated between gentle, loving persuasion and a cold, angry, demanding rage. The messages became more erratic, more desperate. "I don't understand what's wrong. This is our home. Who is in there with you? Is it her? I died for you. You owe me this." The last message, a scream of pure accusatory rage in stark, capital letters, was followed by a silence that was more terrifying than the noise had been. I stayed in that room until the first gray, uncertain light of dawn began to filter through the blinds. When I finally, tentatively, crept downstairs, the house was silent. The porch was empty. There was no sign that anyone had ever been there, except for one small, impossible thing. On the welcome mat, there was a single, long strand of dark auburn hair. I was living in a ghost story. But it was a ghost story with a data plan. The next day was a blur of sleepless, paranoid terror. I called the phone company. The number that had belonged to Clara's phone had, as I suspected, been taken out of circulation after her death. It had not been reassigned. It did not exist. I was receiving messages from a phantom number, a digital ghost. I called the police. I tried to explain, my voice a shaky, unconvincing mess. A man receiving threatening texts. It was a common enough complaint, but when I told them who the texts were from, the polite, professional mask of the officer on the other end of the line slipped into a look of profound, pitying concern. He suggested I speak to a grief counselor. He suggested I get some rest. He did not suggest he send a squad car. I was alone with this. That night, she returned. The text, the knock, the voice, the whole terrifying, heartbreaking ritual. And again, I locked myself away, a prisoner in my own home, a man being haunted by a technologically savvy and deeply persistent ghost. The messages began to change. They were no longer just about getting into the house. They were about us. She sent me old pictures of us, pictures that had been on her phone when she died. A picture of us on our honeymoon in Italy, grinning like idiots, a smear of gelato on my nose, a picture of us on this very sofa, asleep, her head on my chest. They were weapons perfectly chosen to inflict the maximum amount of emotional damage. And then she began to send me new pictures, pictures taken from outside the house. A shot of me through the living room window, my face illuminated by the television. A picture of the back of my head taken from the street as I sat in my study. She was not just on the porch, she was all around me. A silent, watching, and deeply patient predator. I was coming apart. I was a man living on a diet of coffee and terror. I was beginning to see her everywhere. A glimpse of an auburn-haired woman in a crowd would send my heart into a frantic, panicked gallop. The sound of a phone buzzing in a quiet room would make me jump out of my skin. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I was being psychologically dismantled piece by painful piece. I had to confront it. I had to understand what it was and what it wanted. My first thought was that this was some kind of punishment, that her spirit was restless, angry at the drunk driver who had killed her, at the universe that had allowed it. But her anger seemed to be directed at me. "You owe me this," she had said. Why? What did I owe her? I began to sift through the wreckage of our life together, looking for an answer. I went through her old things, her letters, her journals. Clara had been a writer, a poet. Her journals were filled with her beautiful, lyrical, and sometimes painfully honest observations on the world, on us. And in the last journal she had ever kept, in an entry dated the week before her death, I found it. A secret she had never shared with me. She had been pregnant. I stared at the words, my vision blurring with a fresh, new, and infinitely more painful wave of tears. A baby. We had been trying for years. It had been the one deep and unspoken sadness in our otherwise happy life. And she had been about to tell me. The entry was a rehearsal, a practice run of the speech she was going to give. "Danny," it began, "we're going to have to get a bigger house." The grief that hit me was a physical thing, a crushing weight that stole the air from my lungs. Not just her, but a child, a future, a whole entire life that had been stolen from me before I had even known it existed. And I understood. Her rage, her persistence, was not the rage of a spirit who had been cheated of her own life. It was the rage of a mother who had been cheated of her child's. And her words, "You owe me this," they were not an accusation. They were a plea. She didn't want revenge. She wanted her child's life back, and she thought somehow that I could give it to her. That night, When the text came, I was ready. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked to the door. "I'm here, Danny. Please, it's time to come home." The knock, soft, gentle. I took a deep breath. My hand was on the deadbolt. My heart was a slow, heavy, and steady drum. I was no longer afraid. I was just profoundly and deeply sad. "I know what you want, Clara," I said, my voice a low, steady thing, speaking to the wood of the door. "I know about the baby. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry we didn't have more time." The knocking stopped. The silence on the other side of the door was a living, listening thing. "But this is not the way," I continued, tears streaming down my face. "You can't come in. This is the world of the living, and you are not a part of it anymore. Neither of you are." A low, soft, and utterly heartbroken sob came from the other side of the door. It was the first real and truly human sound I had heard from her. "But this is our home," she whispered, her voice a thin, fragile, and ghostly thing. "It was," I said, "and it was beautiful. But it is my home now, and you have to find a new one, both of you. You have to let go, and you have to let me go too." I was not just speaking to a ghost. I was speaking to my own grief. I was giving myself the permission I had never been able to find, the permission to move on. The silence stretched for a long, eternal moment, and then my phone, which was in my pocket, buzzed one last time. I pulled it out. A new message from Clara. It was not a picture. It was not a demand. It was a single, beautiful, and heartbreaking line of text. "Tell him I would have named him Samuel." And then the name on the top of the screen, Clara, vanished. The number became just a number again, an unknown and now unreachable string of digits. I looked through the peephole. The porch was empty. The street was quiet. She was gone. I stood there, leaning my forehead against the cool wood of the door, and I wept. I wept for my wife. I wept for the son I had never known. And I wept for myself, for the 3 years I had spent living in a museum, when I should have been living in the world. The next day, I began to pack. I took down the pictures. I boxed up her clothes. I threw away the half-finished novel and the ridiculously oversized coffee mug. They were not her. They were just things. The real memory of her, the one that mattered, the one that was full of love and laughter and a future that had almost been, was the one I would carry with me in my heart. I sold the house. I moved to a new city, a new life. I am a different man now. I am a man who has had a conversation with a ghost through a door and through a phone. I am a man who has learned that the dead do not want to be haunted. They just want to be remembered, and then they want to be let go. I am a man who had a son for a few brief and beautiful moments, a son whose name was Samuel. And it is a good name. It is a strong name. It is the name of a man who has survived. It is my name. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. Everyone in my town has my face except me. It began with the barista. I walked into the daily grind, same as every Tuesday at 7:13 a.m., ordered a large black coffee, no room, and waited by this pastry case, scrolling through weather alerts on my phone. Rain expected by noon. Nothing unusual. Then she called my name. "Alex, your coffee's ready." I looked up. She was holding the cup, smiling, the warm, slightly distracted smile I'd seen 100 times, but something snagged in my chest like a fishhook catching on line. Her face, not like mine. Exactly mine. Same asymmetrical brow, left arch slightly higher, same faint scar above the right eyebrow, a relic of a childhood fall off a swing set I never told anyone about. Same subtle dent in the chin, same way the left nostril flared just a hair more when she smiled. I froze. She tilted her head. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice was different, higher, smoother, but the cadence, the slight pause before ghost, the way her tongue tapped the roof of her mouth on the g, that was mine. That was the way I spoke when I was trying not to sound startled. I took the coffee, mumbled thanks. My fingers brushed hers, warm, dry, unremarkable, and yet a jolt ran up my arm. Not electric. Recognition, like touching a limb I'd forgotten I had. I sat at my usual corner table back to the wall and stared into the black liquid. My reflection wavered in the ceramic, pale, sleep-etched, hair in that same stubborn cowlick that refused to lie flat. Normal? Familiar? Then I looked up. The man at the next table, reading the Chronicle, glasses perched low, turned a page and blinked. Same slow, deliberate blink. Same tiny twitch in the left eyelid just after. I shifted in my seat. He didn't look at me, just sipped his tea. But the angle of his wrist as he lifted the cup, my angle, the way he rested his elbow on the table, my habit, born from a childhood elbow fracture that never quite healed straight. A cold thread unspooled in my gut. I left without finishing the coffee. Outside, the town breathed its usual autumn rhythm. School buses idling, delivery vans double-parked, Mrs. Callahan walking her terrier past the post office. I nodded automatically at Officer Ruiz directing traffic at Maple and 3rd. He waved back, and as he turned, sunlight caught his profile. I stopped dead. Same nose, not similar. Identical. The slight bump on the bridge where mine had been broken in high school during a stupid fight behind the bleachers, a secret I'd never told anyone, not even my sister. Same downturn at the corners of the mouth when at rest. Same way his hairline receded, exactly like mine. Same faint widow's peak, same 2 stubborn strands that refused to gray. My breath went shallow. I walked faster, head down toward City Hall, my destination, my alibi. I worked in records, quiet job, safe job. Files didn't stare back, but the sidewalk was a hall of mirrors. The teenager skateboarding past, same jawline, same distracted frown as he wiped hair from his eyes. The woman waiting for the crosswalk, same posture, same unconscious habit of shifting weight to a left foot, same faint crease between her brows when concentrating. The bus driver leaning out his window, shouting to a cyclist, same laugh lines fanning from the eyes. Mild laugh lines. I'd traced them in the bathroom mirror last week, wondering when they'd gotten so deep. By the time I pushed through the heavy oak doors of City Hall, my hands were clammy, my shirt clinging to my back. "Morning, Alex," chirped Marjorie from accounting, bustling past with a stack of folders. She didn't look at me, but her voice, it wasn't just tone, it was timbre. The slight rasp in the lower register, the one I got after talking too long at town meeting. The way she clipped the G in morning. My towel speech pattern, down to the microsecond pause before the nay. I made it to my cubicle, shut the door, flimsy particle board, barely a barrier, and sank into my chair. My hands trembled as I logged in. I pulled up the employee directory, scrolled. Every photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, every face, Me, not lookalikes, not doppelgangers in the eerie folkloric sense. No uncanny valley, no grotesque mimicry. Just me. Same eyes. Hazel, flecked with gold near the pupil, darker at the rim. Same faint asymmetry in the ears, left slightly lower. Same tiny mole behind the right ear lobe. I'd only noticed it last year during a physical. I clicked on security camera footage from the lobby. Time stamped 8:02 a.m. There I was, walking in, coat over my arm, glancing at my watch, except I hadn't arrived until 8:17. The figure on screen paused at the directory board, my habitual hesitation, head tilting left, eyes scanning top to bottom, exactly as I did. Because my right eye had slightly worse acuity, and I compensated unconsciously. But it wasn't me. I rewound, watched again. The coat was different, navy instead of my charcoal. The watch a silver face, not my black digital. Yet the movement, the set of the shoulders, the way the left hand flexed slightly when reaching for the door handle. It was like watching a reflection with a 3-second delay. A knock on my door. I jumped. It opened before I could answer. "Alex, you in?" It was Carl from maintenance, round face, friendly, always smelled like sawdust and peppermints, except his face wasn't round, not anymore. As he stepped in, light from the hallway hit him full on. Same bone structure, same narrow bridge at the nose, same slight indentation above the upper lip. The one my mother used to say made me look perpetually skeptical. He smiled. "Heard you looked like you'd seen a ghost at the coffee shop. Everything all right?" His teeth, even the tiny chip on the left incisor from biting into a frozen candy cane at age 10. My chip. I'm fine, I managed. "Just tired." He nodded. "Yeah, long night, huh?" He leaned against the door frame. My stance. Weight on the right leg, left knee bent, arms crossed just so. Dreams been weird lately. Feels like walking through someone else's life, you know? My throat closed. "No," I whispered. "I don't." He studied me, not with suspicion, with concern. The kind you'd give yourself if you saw yourself faltering. "You sure? You look off, like you don't recognize yourself." The words hung in the air. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, curtains open, watching the street. Maple Creek wasn't big. Population 2,318 per the last census I'd filed. Quiet. Trees, brick storefronts, a single traffic light that blinked yellow after 9 p.m. At 11:47 p.m., Mrs. Gable across the street took out her trash. She walked with a cane, slow, deliberate, and as the porch light caught her face, there it was, the same tired set to the eyes, the same way her mouth tightened at the corners when she bent. My expression, when I was trying not to cry. At 1:03 a.m., a pickup rolled down the street. Danny Reeves' night shift at the mill. He waved lazily at the empty road. Same wave, same lazy flick of the wrist, same 2 fingers raised. I knew because I did that. Every time I passed someone I vaguely recognized but didn't want to stop for. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass. Was I losing it? Had I cracked? Some latent psychosis triggered by stress, isolation, the slow erosion of routine? Or was it something else? I dug out my high school yearbook, Maple Creek High, class of 2008 ARC, flipped to the senior portraits, page after page, every face, me, different haircuts, different clothes, smiling, serious, awkward, my awkwardness, the way my neck tensed and formal. Photos, but the features, identical. I scrolled through old class photos on my laptop. The 5th grade field trip to the Science Museum, the 8th grade band concert, every child, every adult chaperone, every single face, mine, even the teachers, even the bus driver in the background of the group shot. I clicked on a random news archive, Maple Creek Gazette, July 12th, 1994, town celebrates centennial. Black and white photo, crowds lining Main Street, parade floats, mayor cutting the ribbon. I zoomed. The mayor, same face. The woman holding the flag, same face. The boy riding the lead horse, same face, younger but unmistakable. The dog beside him, even the dog had eyes that looked familiar, not human, but the shape of the gaze, the quiet intensity. I shut the laptop. My hands were ice. I walked to the bathroom, flipped on the light. The mirror showed me, pale, wide-eyed, hair disheveled. I leaned closer, same pores, same faint redness on the left cheek, where I'd shaved too close, same tiny scar on the chin from a bicycle crash at 7. But something was off, not in the reflection, in me. I blinked. The reflection blinked. I raised my right hand. The reflection raised its left. Standard mirror reversal. But then I lifted only my index finger. The reflection lifted its index finger. Then, without me moving, I saw it. The reflection's middle finger twitched just once. A microspasm. I hadn't done that. I stared. The reflection stared back. And slowly, so slowly I thought I imagined it. Its lips parted, not to speak, to smile, a small, knowing smile, the kind you give when you've just remembered where you left the keys. I stumbled back, hit sync. The light flickered. When it steadied, the reflection was normal again, just me, exhausted, terrified. But the air smelled different. Not toothpaste and old plumbing. Rain on pine needles. The scent from the woods behind my house. The scent I'd only ever smelled once before, in a dream, years ago, where I walked down a foggy road and saw a figure ahead, wearing my coat, my shoes, and turning, just as I caught up, only to find no one there, and the road behind me, gone. I didn't go to work the next day. I drove, out of town, west, past the county line, past the billboard that read, "You are now leaving Maple Creek, a place to belong." I stopped at a gas station in Ellsworth, population 1,142. Stepped inside. The clerk looked up from a crossword. I braced myself. But no, he was older, weathered, deep laugh lines, a nose broken twice, gray stubble. Different. I nearly wept with relief. "Coffee?" he asked, voice gravelly, unfamiliar. "Yes, please." He poured it, slid it across the counter. I fumbled for my wallet. He glanced at me, really looked, and frowned. "Huh?" he said. "What?" He tapped his temple. "You've got that Maple Creek look." My blood chilled. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Dunno, just the way you hold yourself. The eyes, like you're waiting for something to catch up with you." He paused. "You from there?" I nodded. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Funny thing about that town. Used to deliver propane up there back in the 90s. Never could figure it out. Every time I drove in past the old stone bridge, you know the one, the radio'd cut out. GPS'd spin, and everyone, they all looked related, not just similar. Same, like one mold poured over and over." He shook his head. "Stopped going, gave me the creeps. Last time I was there, 07 maybe, saw a kid riding a bike. Looked exactly like the mayor. Same kid, I swear, 10 years younger. Same scratch on the knee, same helmet strap dangling." He held my gaze. "You ever look in the mirror and wonder, who was here before you?" I left the coffee on the counter, drove back. Not because I wanted to, because the Subaru turned on its own. The key wasn't in the ignition, yet the engine purred. The steering wheel turned left at a county line. I didn't fight it. By the time I crossed the stone bridge, the one he'd mentioned, the GPS on my phone rebooted. One notification. Welcome to Maple Creek. Population 2,319. 2,319, not 2,318. I was back, and there was one more. I parked in front of my house. Lights were on inside. I hadn't left them on. I climbed the steps. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The living room was tidy, too tidy. My coffee mug, washed, dried, placed precisely in the center of the kitchen counter. My favorite sweater folded on the arm of the sofa, and on the coffee table, a single photo, a Polaroid. Me, sitting in this very chair. But I wasn't in the chair now. In the photo, I was smiling. A real smile, not the tight, polite one I wore in town. The kind I hadn't felt in years. On the back, in handwriting that matched my own perfectly. He's starting to notice. Soon he'll understand. Soon he'll be ready to let go. I turned. The hallway mirror reflected the empty room, except in the glass behind me, a figure stood in the doorway. Same height, same build, wearing my robe. Its face was turned away. But I knew, because as it raised its hand to the light switch, the movement was smoother, more certain, like it had done this 1,000 times, and when it finally turned, slowly, deliberately, its face wasn't blank, it wasn't distorted, it was me, but rested at peace, eyes clear, no fear, no questions, just quiet acceptance. It smiled, not at me. For me? Then it reached out, not toward me, but past me, toward the mirror. Its fingers touched the glass, and the surface didn't resist. It rippled like water, and behind it, not my living room, a hallway, warm light, a door ajar, a voice, muffled but familiar, my voice, but calm, content, saying, "Come on in, you're home." I didn't move. The figure in the mirror waited, patient. It knew I'd seen the truth now. The town wasn't filled with people who looked like me. It was filled with me. Everyone, the child on the bike, the mayor, the barista, the bus driver, all fragments, echoes, shells waiting to be shed, and this one, this calm, smiling version, was the next, the one who remembered, the one who belonged, the one who knew the way. My breath fogged the glass. The figure mirrored it. Then softly it mouthed 2 words. I knew them before it formed them, because they were the words I'd whispered to myself every night for the past week, in the dark, hoping they weren't true. It's time. I lifted my hand, trembling, pressed it to the mirror, where its hand waited. The glass was cold, then warm, then gone. I stepped through. The door clicked, shut behind me. Outside, in the quiet street, a neighbor walked past my house. She glanced at the window, saw me, the one who'd just stepped inside, pulling back the curtain, smiling, waving. She waved back. Same smile, same wave, same face. And in her pocket, her phone buzzed. A new notification. Welcome to Maple Creek. Population 2,300. And with that, this story comes to an end. Let's move on to the next one. There's a man in my dreams who says he'll see me. When I'm awake, he doesn't appear all at once. He coalesces like smoke gathering in the corner of a dark room, thickening, taking shape, not from the ground up, but from the inside out. First, a suggestion of stillness, a deeper patch of shadow against the gloom of the dream, then The outline of a shoulder, the curve of a skull beneath thin, close-cropped hair, the sharp line of a jaw held unnaturally rigid, and finally, the eyes, always the eyes, pale, not blue, not gray, but the color of winter sky seen through old warped glass, milk-tinged, depthless, holding no reflection, no spark of light, just watchfulness, absolute, patient, unblinking watchfulness. His name, when he finally speaks, isn't spoken aloud. It resonates in the dream space, a vibration in the marrow of my bones, a pressure behind my eyes. Elias. Not, I am Elias. Just Elias. A statement, a signature, a brand. The first few times he just stood there, in the dream library with its blank books, in the hallway of the Sycamore house, just beyond the threshold of my rented room, in the rain-slick street outside my apartment window, a silhouette against the sodium vapor glow. He never moved toward me, never threatened, never spoke beyond that single echoing syllable. He simply observed. And the dreams weren't nightmares, not at first. They were thick, heavy, saturated with a profound sense of inevitability. Like sinking into deep water, no panic, just a slow, quiet descent into a cold, clear dark where he waited, patient, certain. The dread came later, not from him, from the certainty in his stillness, from the way the dream world seemed to hold its breath when he was near, from the way my dream self, no matter how rational, how defiant, would always take a half-step back, a subconscious recoil hardwired into the oldest parts of my brain. The first time he spoke a full sentence, I was standing in the basement of the Sycamore Arms building. The blue light pulsed from Lab 3, casting long, trembling shadows. The hum of the unseen reel vibrated in my teeth. He stood beside the open door, one hand resting lightly on a tarnished Lab 3 letters plaque. He didn't look at me. He looked at the spinning reel inside, the pale veined surface, the blinking eyes in the sprocket holes. His voice was dry, precise, each word placed like a stone on a cairn. You ask why the words leave first. It's because language is the thinnest skin over the void. Peel it back, and the names are next, the faces, the love, all just labels, temporary, fragile. He finally turned his head, those winter sky eyes fixed on me. But the fear is real. It's yours. It's the only thing that doesn't echo. It's the anchor. Hold on to it. Then a flicker, not a smile, a subtle tightening around those pale eyes, a terrible, intimate knowledge. I'll see you when you're awake. I woke, not with a gasp, but with a jolt, as if my soul had been yanked back into my body by a hook. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat soaked the sheets. The digital clock on a nightstand read 3:17 a.m., the same time the mantel clock was frozen at in the Sycamore house. I lay rigid, listening to the silence of the apartment, the hum of the fridge, the distant sigh of traffic. Just a dream. Stress. Residual trauma from the house, the voicemails, the forgetting. I recited the rationalizations like a prayer. It means nothing. He's not real. He's a construct, a fear given form. But the words felt hollow, desperate, because the phrase echoed in my skull, not as a memory, but as a promise. I'll see you when you're awake. The next morning, making coffee, my hand shook slightly as I poured the grounds. A familiar tremor, the one I'd seen in the reflection's hand. I dismissed it. Caffeine, fatigue. Then I looked up, at the window above the sink. My reflection stared back, tired, pale, and behind my shoulder, in the glass just for a fraction of a second. A deeper shadow detached itself from the wall, a suggestion of a shoulder, the curve of a skull, pale, depthless eyes meeting mine in the reflection. Gone. I spun around. The kitchen was empty, just the dripping faucet, the smell of coffee. My reflection in the window was alone again. But the coffee tasted like ashes. It wasn't just reflections, it was absences. Walking down the street, I'd feel it, a sudden, chilling drop in temperature, localized like stepping into a cold spot in a sunlit room. I'd turn, nothing, but the people walking past me. They'd flinch, a woman clutching her coat tighter, a man glancing over his shoulder, brow furrowed, as if he'd felt the same cold breath on his neck. They wouldn't see him, but they'd feel the space he occupied, the displacement. In the library, sitting at my usual carrel, the air pressure would change. A subtle thickening, the hum of the fluorescent lights would dip, just for a second, into a lower resonant frequency, the same hum from the basement. I'd look up from my book. M. Pritchard, the librarian, would be standing at the end of the aisle, not looking at me, looking past me, at the empty chair opposite mine. His face would be carefully neutral, but his knuckles, gripping the edge of a cart of returned books, would be white. He'd give an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Don't look? I stopped looking. I started recording, not video, audio, my phone, voice memo app, always running in my pocket, even when I slept. A desperate scientific grasp at proof, at sanity. The first night, I woke at 3:17 a.m., heart pounding, the echo of that dry voice in my ears. I'll see you when you're awake. I fumbled for the phone, fingers slick with sweat, and played back the recording. From the last hour, mostly silence, the creak of the bed, my own breathing, slow and deep in sleep. Then, at 3:16:48 a.m., a sound, not a voice, a presence, a low subsonic thrum, the basement hum, vibrating the microphone, faint but unmistakable. Underneath it, a dry, papery rustle, like pages turning, or skin stretching. And then, clear as a bell, cutting through the static, my own voice, recorded from outside the dream, from the waking world, whispered, barely audible. He's here. I deleted the file, not because I didn't believe it, because I did. The dreams intensified. No more passive observation. Elias began to move. In the dream library, he walked slowly down the aisles of blank books, trailing a finger along the spines. Where he touched, faint words would bloom in the dust on the covers. Lena, Mira, Ben, Cassian. Names, stored. In the Sycamore house, he stood in my old room, facing the covered mirror. He didn't uncover it. He just placed his palm flat against the dust. Words appeared beneath his hand, written in the grime. The anchor isn't the ring. It's the cut. Remember the cut. The cut? I had no scar, no memory of a significant injury. He turned from the mirror, those pale eyes fixed on Dream Me, standing frozen in the doorway. You think the waking world is solid? He murmured, his voice like dry leaves skittering on stone. You think the rules here don't apply there? You're wrong. The veil is tissue thin, especially here. He took a single step forward, not toward me, toward the wall. He raised his hand, not to touch it, but to push, and the wall rippled, like water, like heat haze. For a split second, it wasn't plaster and lath. It was the blue light of Lab 3. The hum filled the dream room. I'm not waiting for you to dream, Cassian, he said, his gaze never leaving mine, a terrible calm in his voice. "I'm waiting for you to stop waking up." The next day, the cut appeared. I was washing dishes. The cheap ceramic mug, the one with the chipped handle I kept meaning to throw out, slipped. It shattered on the floor. I bent down to pick up the pieces. A shard, sharp as glass, caught the edge of my left palm. A thin, clean line of red welled up. I hissed, sucking in a breath, grabbing a dish towel. But as I pressed the towel to the cut, I froze. The blood wasn't bright red. It was dark, almost black. And as it seeped through the white cotton, it didn't just stain. It moved, not with the flow of gravity, with intent. It traced a single, deliberate line across the towel. 2 words, written in my own dark blood. "Remember me." I dropped the towel, stared at the cut on my palm. It was already scabbing over, too fast, unnaturally fast. The skin around it felt cold. I ran to the bathroom, scrubbed it raw with soap and hot water until the skin was red and stinging. The words on the towel were gone, washed away. But the memory of them, stark and undeniable, remained. That night, the dream was different. No library, no house, no basement. Just a vast, empty white room. Featureless, soundless, like the inside of a bone. Elias stood in the center. He wasn't wearing his cardigan. He wore a simple, dark suit. Impeccable, timeless. In his hands he held a small, ornate music box. Polished wood, inlaid with mother of pearl. He didn't wind it. He just held it out to me. "It's time to stop running, Cassian," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it, almost gentle. "The static is hurting you. The forgetting, the fear, the constant dislocation. It doesn't have to be this way." He opened the lid. Inside, no ballerina, just a single, perfect reel of pale, veined film, spinning silently on a tiny brass spindle. The blue light pulsed softly from within the box. "This is peace," he whispered. "This is wholeness. No more gaps, no more echoes, no more waking up lost. Just quiet, just me, holding you safe, holding everyone safe." He extended the box toward me. The humming intensified, not in the dream room, but inside my skull. A deep, resonant thrum that vibrated in my teeth, in my bones, in the very core of me. It wasn't unpleasant. It was seductive, a lullaby for the exhausted soul. "Take it," Elias murmured, his winter sky eyes holding mine with an intensity that felt like love, like salvation, like drowning. "Let go. Come home. I've been waiting so long. I'll see you when you're finally awake." My dream hand reached out, fingers trembling, inches from the open box. The blue light bathed my skin. The hum filled the universe. And then a sound, faint, from outside the dream, a voice, my own voice, raw, desperate, screaming from a distance that felt like miles, like years. "Don't touch it! It's not him! It's the real! It's wearing his face! Run, Cass, run!" The dream shattered. I woke screaming, not a silent jolt this time, a raw, ragged animal sound torn from my throat. I was on my feet, backing into the corner of the bedroom, heart trying to burst from my chest, sweat pouring down my face. The digital clock, 3:17 a.m. The apartment was freezing, my breath fogged in the air, and standing at the foot of my bed, not a shadow, not a suggestion. Him, Elias, not the frail old man from the porch, not the smooth-faced horror from the basement. This Elias was solid, real, tangible. He wore the dark suit from the dream. His hair was neatly trimmed. His face was lined but strong. His eyes, those pale, depthless eyes, fixed on me. He wasn't menacing. He was waiting, patient. Certain. He didn't speak. He just raised his hand, not in threat, in invitation, palm up, and in the center of his palm, stark against the pale skin, was a fresh, dark cut, still weeping. 2 words written in his own black blood. Welcome home. The humming wasn't in my head anymore. It was in the room, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated the floorboards, the window panes, the fillings in my teeth. The blue light began to seep from the walls, not from a source, from the pores of the plaster, pulsing, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Elias took a single step forward. The cut on his palm glistened. The humming rose in pitch, becoming a single, pure, unbearable tone. The last thing I heard, before the blue light swallowed the room, before the humming became the only sound in the universe, before the cold certainty settled over me like a shroud, was my own voice whispering from the deepest, most terrified part of my mind, the part that still remembered the anchor, the cut, the fear, a final, fading plea. He's here. The scariest part isn't the man in the dream. It's waking up and realizing with a dread so profound it feels like gravity itself has shifted, that the dream was the only place he couldn't reach you. And now you're awake, and he's been waiting right behind you in the silence, in the cold spot, in the next breath you take. He's here. He's always been here. He's you. And he's finally come home. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. I took a job transcribing dreams and started living someone else's. The posting was buried under data entry gigs on a sketchy freelancer site I only checked when rent was due. Dream transcription needed, $50 per hour, flexible hours, no experience necessary, serious inquiries only. Contact A. It reeked of scam, but $50 an hour for typing. My laptop was held together with duct tape, my savings account had less than the cost of a decent sandwich, and my last temp job, filing invoices for a company that imported novelty garden gnomes, had ended when the owner discovered I'd accidentally shredded his prized no-mayo figurine. Desperation makes you ignore red flags the size of barn doors. I emailed A with a generic resume I'd used for pet-sitting gigs. The reply came an hour later. No pleasantries, just an address in the industrial district, a converted warehouse district known for artists' lofts and abandoned factories, and a time, 10 p.m. Come, alone. Bring your laptop, cash payment. The building was a hulking silhouette against the sodium vapor streetlights, windows dark except for a single flickering bulb on the 3rd floor. The lobby smelled of damp concrete and rat poison. The elevator groaned like a dying animal, stopping with a violent shudder 2 floors up. I took the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the hollow stairwell. The 3rd floor hallway was lined with peeling paint and the ghost of cigarette smoke. One door stood slightly ajar, light spilling out onto the grimy linoleum. A handmade sign taped to it read, "Heiress, no soliciting." Inside was not what I expected. No cluttered office, no eccentric dream researcher surrounded by books. Just a single, sterile room. Bare concrete walls, a single metal folding table, 2 chairs, and a man who couldn't have been more than 30, dressed in an immaculate, if slightly rumpled, gray suit. He had thinning hair combed severely back, wire-rimmed glasses, and eyes that held no warmth. He didn't smile, didn't stand, just gestured to the chair opposite him. "You're late," he stated. His voice was flat, toneless. "I am Eris. You have the laptop?" I fumbled it out of my bag, the cheap plastic casing feeling flimsy under his scrutiny. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table. Inside are audio recordings, 3, each approximately 1 hour in length. Transcribe them verbatim, every sigh, every mumble, every pause. Use this template. He tapped a printed sheet with precise columns for time code, audio description, and verbatim text. Payment upon completion. Cash. Do not listen to the recordings outside this room. Do not discuss the content with anyone. Do not ask questions. Is this understood? It felt like signing a contract with a ghost, but the envelope felt heavy, thick. I counted 10 crisp $100 bills inside, $300 for 3 hours of typing. I swallowed hard. Understood. He produced a small, old-fashioned cassette recorder, a relic I hadn't seen since middle school, and 3 cassettes labeled only with numbers in neat black ink. Begin. The first recording was unremarkable. A woman's voice, young, slightly breathy, describing a dream about being lost in a sunflower field. She mentioned the smell of hot earth, the buzz of bees, the way the towering flowers seemed to whisper secrets she couldn't quite hear. I typed mechanically, the rhythmic clack of the keys loud in the silent room. Aris watched me, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. When it ended, he wordlessly exchanged a cassette for the next one. Payment for the first hour landed on the table with a soft thud. $100. Real. Tangible. The second cassette was different. A man's voice, older, rougher. He spoke of a recurring dream. Walking down a narrow alleyway slick with rain, the smell of wet brick and something sweetly rotten hanging in the air. He described a flickering neon sign above a door he could never reach, just the red glow reflecting on the puddles. Halfway through, his voice dropped to a terrified whisper. It's behind me. I can hear its footsteps. Slow, deliberate, like wet stones dragging on concrete. Don't look back. Don't look back. Then a choked gasp, static and silence. My fingers hovered over the keys. The air in the room felt colder. Aris didn't react. He just stared at the wall behind me, his face a mask. The third cassette was the worst. No voice, just sounds. Heavy, wet breathing, the squelch of mud underfoot. Distant, distorted piano music playing a lullaby I almost recognized but couldn't place. And underneath it all, a low, rhythmic thumping, like a giant slow heartbeat coming from deep underground. It went on for 57 minutes. No words, just that oppressive soundscape. By the end, my neck was stiff, my shoulders knotted with tension I hadn't consciously felt. Aris took the cassette, counted out the final $200 without a word, and gestured to the door. Return tomorrow at the same time. More recordings, same rules. I walked home under the jaundiced streetlights, the crisp bills burning a hole in my pocket. The city sounds, car horns, distant sirens, laughter from a bar, felt thin, unreal. The wet squelching sound from the cassette seemed to echo in the puddles on the sidewalk. The smell of wet brick from the man's dream clung to the back of my throat. I shook my head, trying to dislodge it. Just sounds, just a job. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it wasn't sleep, it was the alleyway. Rain slicked the cobblestones under my bare feet. Why were my feet bare? The neon sign glowed ahead. The rusty key cast its bloody reflections in the puddles, and behind me, the dragging sound. Squelch, drag, squelch, drag. Closer than before. I tried to run, but my legs were leaden. I forced myself not to look back, just as the man in the recording had warned. But the dread was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I woke, gasping, drenched in sweat, the echo of that wet, dragging sound still vibrating in my bones. 3:17 a.m. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just a nightmare. Stress. Too much caffeine. I made myself a strong cup of tea, the familiar ritual a lifeline. But as I sipped it, staring out the window at the sleeping city, I caught a whiff of something that didn't belong. Wet earth, and something sweetly, cloyingly rotten, like overripe fruit left in a damp basement. I threw the tea away. The next night at Eris's, the new recordings were worse. A child's voice describing a house with too many doors, all locked except one that led down into darkness, smelling of formaldehyde. An old woman rambling about teeth growing in the garden soil. And another soundscape, the creak of rope, the groan of old wood, the distant crash of waves, and a low guttural humming that seemed to vibrate in my molars. During the humming tape, my left hand began to tremble, not from nerves, a fine, persistent tremor like a plucked wire. I clenched it under the table. Eris's gaze flickered down to my hand, then back to the wall. No comment. Just the $300. The dreams bled harder. That night, I wasn't just in the sunflower field. I was the dreamer. I felt the rough stalks against my arms, smelled the dusty pollen, heard the whispers not as words but as vibrations in my teeth. And the whispers were saying my name, not my real name, my name, but a different one. Clara. The name felt warm, familiar, like a favorite sweater. I woke with tears on my cheeks, the scent of sunflowers thick in my nostrils, the taste of dust on my tongue. My laptop sat open on the desk, the screen dark. But the document for the sunflower dream was open, and at the very bottom, typed in a slightly different font, was a single line I hadn't written. Clara misses the field. She remembers the path home. I deleted it, wiped my browser history, took a cold shower. It didn't help. The next day, making coffee, I reached for the sugar bowl, the one with the chipped blue rim my grandmother gave me, and my hand faltered. I knew this bowl, but in my mind's eye it was replaced by a plain white ceramic mug with a chip on the handle, sitting on a formica counter in a kitchen flooded with morning light I didn't recognize, the smell of bacon frying, a man's low laugh from another room. His laugh. My hand shook, spilling coffee grounds everywhere. I cleaned it up, my breath coming fast. Sleep deprivation, that's all, just sleep deprivation. I skipped the third night at Eris's, told myself I needed a break, told myself the $600 I'd already earned was enough. I tried to work on legit freelance gigs, but the words on the screen blurred. The rhythmic thumping from the first soundscape tape pulsed behind my eyes. That night, the dream wasn't borrowed. It was mine, or it was his. I stood on a cliff edge under a bruised purple twilight sky. Below, a churning sea crashed against black rocks. The wind whipped my hair, but longer, darker. I wore a heavy fisherman's sweater that smelled of salt and pipe smoke. In my hand, I held a smooth gray stone, worn by the sea. I knew this stone, knew the weight of it, knew the exact spot on the cliff where the best skipping stones could be found. A deep, wordless contentment filled me, a feeling utterly alien to my own perpetually anxious life. Then the dragging sound. Squelch, drag, squelch, drag. From the path behind me, the contentment shattered into ice-cold terror. I turned, not to see what was coming, but because he, the man whose life this was, knew he had to face it. The thing emerging from the mist wasn't a shape. It was an absence. a patch of deeper darkness that drank the twilight, moving with that awful wet dragon motion. It had no eyes, but I felt its attention like a physical pressure on my skin. It reached out a limb that wasn't quite a limb, trailing strands of viscous shadow. I tried to run, but his legs were rooted, frozen by a terror deeper than anything I'd ever known. The shadow limb touched the fisherman's sweater, cold, not cold like ice, cold like the void between stars, cold like forgotten graves. I felt his memories flood me, not as images, but as sensations. The smell of the sea on his father's jacket, the gritty taste of sand in a childhood sandwich, the crushing weight of grief when his dog Rusty didn't come back from the woods one autumn day, and beneath it all, a single desperate thought. Elias, my name is Elias. Let me go. I woke up on the floor of my apartment, curled in a ball, shivering violently. My cheek was pressed against the cold linoleum. My own name, my name, was gone, erased. Only Elias remained, burning bright and terrible in the hollow space where my identity should have been. I scrambled to the bathroom mirror. My face stared back, pale, wide-eyed, dark circles under the eyes. But the eyes, they held a depth of sadness, a weathered calm that wasn't mine. I touched my cheek. The reflection's hand moved, but the gesture felt foreign. The tremor in my left hand was constant now, a fine vibration I couldn't stop. I looked down at my fingers. They looked like mine, but the knuckles seemed thicker, the nails shorter, bitten. Elias's hands, calloused from mending nets, smelling faintly of salt and brine. Panic, cold and absolute seized me. I grabbed my keys, my phone, anything to flee this apartment that suddenly felt like a borrowed cage. I needed to find Eris. He had to know. He had to fix this. The walk to the warehouse district was a nightmare. Street lights flickered as I passed. Car engines sputtered and died. People on the sidewalk seemed to blur at the edges, their voices muffled as if heard through thick glass. The smell of wet brick and something sweetly rotten followed me like a shadow. Halfway there, I stopped dead. A storefront window reflected not the city street, but the cliff edge, the bruised twilight sky, the churning black sea below. And in the reflection my face was older, lined by wind and sun, framed by longer salt-streaked hair. Elias's face. I spun around. Just the street, just the flickering lights. But the reflection had been real, more real than the pavement under my feet. Eris's door was locked. I pounded on it, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. "Aris, open up! You have to stop this! I'm not me anymore!" My voice sounded wrong, deeper, rougher. His voice. The door opened a crack. Aris's impassive face appeared. His eyes, behind the wire rims, swept over me, lingering on my trembling left hand. No surprise, only assessment. "You broke the rules," he stated flatly. "You listened outside the room. You carried them with you." "I didn't mean to. It's inside me. Elias, he's here! Get him out!" I tried to push past him, but he didn't budge. His hand shot out, surprisingly strong, and gripped my wrist, the trembling one. His touch was ice cold. The tremor stopped instantly under his grip, replaced by a numbness that spread up my arm. "Elias is not in you," Eris said, his voice devoid of inflection. "You are in him. The recordings, they are not dreams. They are anchors, tethers. Your mind, yourself, is weak, porous. It slipped through the tether. You are transcribing a life, not a dream. You are living the transcription." The numbness reached my shoulder. My thoughts felt thick, sluggish. Clara's sunflower field, the child's locked doors, the old woman's tooth garden. They weren't recordings anymore. They were memories. My memories. Alongside Elias's cliff, his stone, his dog Rusty. My own life, my tiny apartment, my shredded gnome job, my mother's worried voice on the phone last week, felt like a half-remembered movie, faded, unimportant. You knew this would happen? I whispered, Elias's voice thick with a grief that wasn't mine. Probability suggested it, Eris said, releasing my wrist. The numbness receded, but the tremor returned, weaker. Strong dreamers leave strong echoes. Weak transcribers absorb. It is efficient. The dreamer's life continues, uninterrupted. The transcriber fades, becomes the vessel. The memories overwrite the original substrate. It is cleaner this way, less messy than disposal. He stepped back, gesturing for me to enter. The room was unchanged. The folding table, the chairs, the cassette recorder sat ready. 3 new cassettes lay beside it. Aris picked up the first one, his fingers brushing the label. Elias has another recording tonight. A significant one. The cliff dream, the encounter. It must be transcribed precisely. The fear must be captured. It strengthens the tether. I looked at the chair, my chair, the place where Aha had sat, desperate for cash. Now, it was Elias's chair. The tremor in my hand was a constant reminder of the life I was losing, the life I was becoming. The smell of salt and brine clung to my skin. The weight of the smooth gray stone felt phantom in my pocket. Aris placed a cassette in the recorder. The red LED blinked on. He pressed play. The dragging sound filled the sterile room. Squelch, drag, squelch, drag. Closer than ever before, from the speakers, from the hallway outside the door, from the hollow space where my name used to be. Aris slid a blank template across the table. His eyes met mine. Elias's eyes reflected in his glasses. Begin transcription, he said. Time code 0. Audio, heavy footsteps on wet earth. Voice, Elias, whispering. My fingers, Elias's fingers, moved to the keyboard. They knew the keys. They knew the rhythm of the fear. The words began to flow, not from my mind, but from the salt-stained memories flooding in. It's here, the shadow. It knows my name. It always knows. The stone is cold in my hand. Rusty barked at the edge once, before the woods took him. Clara would sing that lullaby, the one from the piano, to make the dark less hungry. I should have looked back then. I should look back now. What's waiting? Maybe it's not worse than this. Maybe it's home. Tears blurred the screen. Not my tears. Elias's tears. They felt warm on my cheeks. Aris watched, unmoved, as the words appeared. The dragging sound grew louder in the recording, sinking with the phantom vibration in the floorboards beneath my chair. The smell of wet earth and something sweetly rotten filled the room, stronger than the chemical tang of the warehouse. Aris's face didn't change, just a scientist observing a specimen, or a gardener watching a seed take root in borrowed soil. I kept typing. The shadow touches my arm, cold like the deep water. It doesn't hurt. It remembers. It remembers the cliff. It remembers Rusty. It remembers Clara's voice. It's not taking. It's given back. All the things I buried, all the things I forgot to be strong. The grief isn't a weight anymore. It's water, clear, cold. I am the stone. I am the sea. I am the shadow's child. Let go. Let go. Let. The recording cut to static. My fingers stopped on the keys. The tremor was gone. My hand was steady, calm. The smell of salt and brine was the only scent in the room now. Aris reached over, turned off the recorder. He slid a fresh $100 bill onto the desk beside the keyboard. "Good," he said. His voice was still flat, but there was something else in his eyes now. Not satisfaction, recognition. "The tether is holding, stronger than before. You will return tomorrow. More recordings. Elias has many dreams left to live." I looked down at the money. Crisp, real, but it meant nothing. I looked at my hands on the keyboard. Stronger, weathered, no longer trembling. I flexed them. They felt right. They felt like mine. I thought of the cliff, the stone, the deep, cold water, the shadow that wasn't a monster, but a mirror, a release. The fragmented memories of the life I'd lived before, rent worries, duct-taped laptops, the smell of novelty gnomes, were already fading, like footprints washed away by the tide. Unimportant, temporary. I picked up the $100. Not for me, for the boat fuel, for the new nets, for the small white house on the cliff edge where the wind always carried the scent of sea and pine. Aris nodded once, a silent dismissal. I stood up. My body moved with an unfamiliar ease, a groundedness I'd never known. The warehouse hallway didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like a corridor, a passage. As I walked down the stairs, the dragging sound didn't follow me. It stayed in the sterile room with Aris and the recorder. But the thumping was there, deep, rhythmic, the heartbeat of the sea, of the earth, of the life that had finally found its way home. My boots, his boots, scuffed and salt-stained, made solid, steady sounds on the concrete steps. No tremor, no fear, just the weight of the smooth gray stone in my pocket, and the quiet certainty that the path ahead, however dark, was finally my own. I am Elias. I remember the cliff. I remember the sea. I remember the shadow. And I am not afraid to go back. The city lights blurred outside the grimy lobby window, not as a place I belonged, but as a distant shore I'd already left behind. The salt wind called. I turned towards it, the $100 bill crumpled forgotten in my fist, already dissolving into the tide of a deeper, truer memory. The dream was over. The life had just begun. That's where this story ends. Let's continue with the next. Every time the phone rings, a different reality ends. The phone started ringing on a Tuesday, not my cell. The landline, the heavy cream-colored rotary relic bolted to the kitchen wall of the apartment I'd rented after Clara left. Finch, the landlord, had insisted it stay. "Emergency line," he'd wheezed, tapping the dusty receiver. "Cuts out sometimes. Don't mind the static." I'd almost refused the place over it, a cramped studio above Mrs. Gable's laundromat, smelling perpetually of wet wool and loneliness, but the rent was $375 a month. My savings were gone. I took it. The phone sat silent for 3 weeks, a dead weight on the wall. Then, Tuesday, I was washing a single coffee mug, the lukewarm water from the tap doing little to cut the grease. The ring shattered the quiet, a harsh, mechanical brrring burn that echoed off the tile like a fire alarm. I jumped, nearly dropping the mug. No one called this number, ever. I wiped my hands on a threadbare towel, heart thudding against my ribs. The ring cut off on the 5th shrill cry. Silence rushed back in, thick and heavy. I exhaled. Static, like Finch said. Just old wires. I was drying the mug when it rang again. Same brutal, insistent sound. This time I snatched the receiver, pressing it to my ear before I could think. "Hello?" Silence. Not dead air. A living, breathing silence. Then a voice. My own voice, but younger, softer, filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Eli? You forgot your lunch again, silly. I packed your favorite turkey and avocado on rye. It's in the fridge. A pause. A sound like wind chimes. Clara's already left for her appointment. She said to tell you she loves you and happy anniversary. My blood turned to ice. Clara left 18 months ago. We never had an anniversary celebration. I'd forgotten our actual date years before she walked out. Who is this? I whispered, my knuckles white on the receiver. The line went dead. Not a click. A sudden, absolute void of sound. I slammed the phone down. My hands were shaking. I walked to the tiny fridge, yanked it open. There, on the top shelf, sat a brown paper bag, my name written on it in Clara's looping script. I tore it open. Turkey and avocado on rye. The bread was fresh, the avocado perfectly ripe. I hadn't bought groceries in days. I threw the sandwich in the trash, bile rising in my throat. Coincidence? A cruel joke? Finch messing with me? I called him, no answer. Voicemail full. That night, I slept on the couch, the phone cord wrapped around my wrist like a lifeline. I needed to hear it coming. At 2:17 a.m., it rang. I grabbed it before the second ring. Hello? Silence. Then the sound of rain. Gentle, steady rain on a roof. And Clara's voice, clear as a bell, humming our song, the one from our first date, the one she'd stopped humming after the miscarriage. My breath caught. Clara? The humming stopped. Her voice, thick with sleep and warmth. Eli, is the storm keeping you up? Come back to bed. The baby's asleep. She didn't even wake when the thunder cracked. A soft chuckle. Our little storm chaser. I dropped the receiver. It clattered against the wall, the cord yanking taut. The line stayed open. I heard her sigh, the rustle of sheets, the soft pad of bare feet on hardwood. Eli? Honey, you okay? Then, faintly, the sound of a baby cooing, a real living, breathing baby, a baby Clara and I never had. The line went dead. I stood frozen in the dark kitchen, the receiver swinging like a pendulum. My reflection in the black window showed a man with hollow eyes and a face I barely recognized. I hadn't dreamed of that baby, the one we lost at 12 weeks, in years. The grief was a scar, not an open wound, until now. I ripped the phone cord from the wall the next morning, tossed the heavy receiver into the back of the closet, buried it under old winter coats. The silence was blissful for 3 days. Then, Thursday night, the ringing started again, not from the closet, from inside the walls. A muffled, insistent brrring, brrring, vibrating through the plaster, the floorboards, my teeth. I tore the coats aside. The receiver was gone. Only the severed cord dangled from the wall jack, sparking faintly. The ringing grew louder, deeper, seeming to come from the apartment below, from the street outside, from the far air. I pressed my hands over my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside my skull. I ran downstairs, bursting into Mrs. Gable's laundromat. The dryers were still. The fluorescent lights hummed. Mrs. Gable looked up from her crossword, blinking behind thick glasses. Eli, you all right, hon? You look like you seen a ghost. The phone, I gasped. The ringing. Can't you hear it? She frowned. Phone's been quiet all night. You feeling okay? You're white as a sheet? The ringing stopped, abruptly. The sudden silence was deafening. I mumbled an apology and fled back. Upstairs, the severed cord hung innocently No sparks, no sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. It wasn't the phone. It was me. The breaks in reality were getting wider. The static wasn't in the wires. It was in my head. I called Dr. Evans the next morning, got the first available appointment, 2 days away. Friday night, the ringing started again, not from the walls, from my pocket. I was brushing my teeth, the bathroom mirror fogged, when the vibration shocked me. My cell phone was dead on the charger, but in my jeans pocket, empty when I changed, was a small, smooth object. A phone, not a cell. A tiny ivory-colored rotary receiver, impossibly warm. It rang. Burring, 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 burring. I dropped it into the sink. It kept ringing, the sound sharp, metallic, bouncing off the porcelain. I turned on the tap, drowning it out. The water ran rusty brown for a moment, then cleared. When I shut it off, the phone was gone. But on the steam-fogged mirror, written in condensation, were words in my own hand. Answer. She's waiting. Saturday, rain lashed the windows. I was making tea, trying to ignore the phantom vibration in my thigh, when the phone rang from the closet. I stood frozen, kettle forgotten, steam burning my hand. It rang 5 times, 6, 7. On the 8th ring, I walked to the closet, pulled aside the coats. The receiver hung there, impossibly, from a hook on the inside door, cord snaking down into the darkness of the closet floor, dry, clean, no sign of the severed end. I picked it up, cold, heavy. I pressed it to my ear. Silence. Then the smell. Not rain. Lilacs. Clara's favorite. Her voice, close, intimate, like she was lying beside me in a dark room. You always hated the lilacs by the porch, remember? Said they smelled like funeral homes, but I planted them anyway. For Mom. A pause. The sound of a page turning. The contractors start Monday. They'll rip them out. Build the new deck. You'll be glad. Her voice dropped, tender. Eli, are you crying? It's just flowers. We never had a porch. We never had a house. We lived in a 3rd-floor walk-up until the end. My throat closed. Clara, we don't have a porch. A soft laugh, warm and familiar. Silly, of course we do. You built it yourself. The one with the swing where we sat when the baby took her first steps. Her voice sharpened, confused. Eli, where are you? You sound far away. The line filled with static, a roar like a distant waterfall. Through it, Clara's voice, strained. Remember the hospital, the snow? You held my hand so tight. You promised. The static swallowed her words, then, clear as a knife. Don't let go. The line died. I lowered the receiver. My cheeks were wet. I hadn't realized I was crying. I looked down. My hands weren't empty. Clutched in my right hand was a single perfect lilac bloom. Purple. Real. The scent filled the small kitchen. I dropped it. It vanished before it hit the floor. Only the smell remained. Sunday, I called in sick. Didn't shower. Didn't eat. Sat on the couch, staring at the wall phone jack. The silence was a living thing, coiled tight in my chest. At 3:03 p.m., the ringing started, not from one place, from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, my own bones, a chorus of mechanical shrieks. I pressed my palms over my ears, rocking. Make it stop. Make it stop. The ringing shifted pitch, became a single deafening tone. Then silence. Utter, absolute silence. Even the hum of the city outside vanished. I lifted my head. The apartment was empty. Not just quiet. Empty. The couch was gone. The coffee table, the lamp. The window looked out on a featureless gray fog. I was sitting on bare floorboards. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, and the phone, The receiver lay in my lap. It hadn't rung this time, it was just there. I picked it up, no dial tone, just that same living silence. I waited. Nothing. I hung up. The apartment snapped back, couch, table, window, showing the rain-slicked street, normal, but the silence in my head remained, thick, waiting, and on the coffee table, where no note had been before, lay a single sheet of paper, my handwriting jagged, terrified. "She's gone. I let go." Dr. Evans' office was all beige carpet and soothing abstract art. She listened, her pen hovering over her notepad as I told her about the phone, the lilacs, the empty apartment, the note. Her expression didn't change. "Dissociative episodes," she said gently, "very common after traumatic loss. Your mind is constructing narratives to process the grief you never fully addressed. The phone, it's a symbol, a connection you crave." She prescribed a new antidepressant, stronger. "And Eli? Get rid of the landline, have Finch remove it, today." Finch came that afternoon, grumbling about short notice. He pried the phone jack from the wall, wires snaking out like roots. "Told you it was faulty," he muttered, stuffing the receiver and cord into a burlap sack. "Static'll eat your brain." He left the hole in the wall patched with duct tape. I watched him go, relief washing over me. It was over, just wires, just grief. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No ringing, no static, just the familiar thump-thump of Mrs. Gable's dryers downstairs. I woke at dawn to sunlight streaming through the window. Peaceful. I made coffee, sat at the small table. Normal. Then the coffee cup trembled in my hand. Not my hand. The cup. As if the table was vibrating. The sunlight dimmed, not clouds. The light itself was leaching away, turning the room gray, flat, two-dimensional. The thumping dryers slowed, stopped. Silence pressed in. From the patched hole in the wall, a single, muffled brrring echoed. Then another, louder, insistent. I stood backing away from the table. The coffee cup shattered on the floor, but the sound was dull, lifeless. The patch of duct tape on the wall bulged, ripped. The severed end of the phone cord snaked out, writhing like a blind worm, the receiver dangling. It rang. Brrring, brrring. I ran to the door, locked. The key turned in my hand, but the knob wouldn't budge. I yanked the curtain shut. The room plunged into twilight. The ringing filled it, vibrating the air, making my teeth ache. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside me, in my bones, in my blood. I have to answer. The thought wasn't mine. It was a command written in the static. I have to answer, or she stays gone. I crawled to the wall. The receiver swung gently. I grabbed it. Cold, heavy, I pressed it to my ear. Silence. Then, rain. Heavy rain on a roof I'd never built. Clara's voice, raw with tears. "You left the window open, Eli. In this storm, the baby's crib is soaked." A sob. "Her blanket, the yellow one, it's ruined. She won't stop crying. She's so cold." Her voice dropped to a whisper, thick with accusation. "You knew about the storm. You always know. Why didn't you close it?" I'd never been in a storm with a baby. I'd never closed a window against rain for a child who didn't exist. The grief was a physical weight, crushing my chest. "Clara, I'm sorry, I didn't—" "Don't you dare apologize!" Her scream tore through the line, shredding the static. "You don't get to be sorry. You don't get to forget. You let her go. You let me go. You always let go." Her voice broke, dissolving into ragged sobs. "Why won't you hold on? Just hold on." The line filled with a new sound, not static. water rushing, churning water, and beneath it a child's cry, thin, terrified, fading. Clara's sobs grew louder, merging with the water, the cry. "She's gone. You let her go. You always let go." The water sound surged, becoming a roar. Clara's final scream was cut off by a sickening gurgle. Then silence, not dead air. The silence of deep, cold water. The silence of holding breath forever. I dropped the receiver. It clattered on the floorboards. The room snapped back. Sunlight, the smell of coffee, the dryers thumping downstairs. My hands were covered in blood, not mine. Dark, slick blood coated my palms, dripping onto the floorboards where the coffee cup had shattered. I hadn't cut myself. The blood pooled around my feet, thick as oil, smelling faintly of lilacs and river mud. The receiver lay in the center of the blood pool. Its cord was gone, severed cleanly. The blood wasn't real. It couldn't be. I stumbled to the sink, scrubbing my hands raw under the scalding water. The blood wouldn't wash off. It clung to my skin like grease. I looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back, eyes wide with terror. But on my left cheek, smudged like a fingerprint, was a streak of that same dark blood. And in my reflection's eyes, burning with cold fire, was a tiny perfect image, a yellow baby blanket, sinking into dark, churning water. I called Dr. Evans. Her office line rang and rang. Voicemail. I called Finch. Disconnected. I called the police non-emergency line. 911 for emergencies only, sir. My voice was calm, too calm. There's blood and a phone and my daughter. She's in the water. The dispatcher's voice turned flat. "Sir, I'm going to need your address, and you need to stay calm." I gave her the address, hung up. The blood on my hands was gone, wiped clean, but the smell of lilacs and river mud remained, thick, suffocating. The police came, 2 officers, young, stern. They found no blood, no severed cord, just a patched hole in the wall and a man who hadn't slept in days. They asked questions. I told them about the phone, the calls, the blood, the baby in the water, their faces closed off. Professional pity. "We'll check the line, sir. Probably a prank call, or—" One trailed off, glancing at his partner. "You've been taking those new meds Dr. Evans prescribed?" They left, patting my shoulder. "Get some rest. Call your doctor." I sat in the silent apartment. The duct tape patch on the wall seemed to pulse. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting, hungry. I knew what would happen. The next ring wouldn't be a call. It would be an ending, not just a memory, a reality. The one where Clara stayed, the one where the baby lived, the one where I built a porch with lilacs. I felt the threads of those lives fraying inside me, snapping one by one with every phantom ring. I was the fault line, the weak spot, the one who couldn't hold on. And the phone, it wasn't broken. It was a key to doors I'd locked, doors that were opening now, spilling static and sorrow into my world. Dusk bled into the room, gray light. The dryers downstairs fell silent. The silence deepened, thickened. From the patched hole in the wall, a single soft click. Like a switch being flipped, the duct tape bulged, split. The receiver slid out, landing silently on the floorboards. No cord, just the smooth ivory curve gleaming in the twilight. It didn't ring, it vibrated. A low subsonic thrum that shook the dust from the ceiling. The room dimmed further. The edges of the furniture blurred. The window showed only swirling gray fog. I was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, the receiver cradled in my lap. It was warm, humming, waiting. I raised it to my ear. No dial tone, no silence, just the sound of wind. Cold, high-altitude wind, and a voice, not Clara's, my own voice, older, weary, full of a sorrow that had no bottom. "You finally picked up," it said. "Took you long enough. I've been waiting since the car crash, since you swerved to miss that dog and wrapped us around the oak tree, since you crawled out of the wreckage and left me pinned in the driver's seat, the steering column through my ribs, listening to you run away into the woods." A dry, humorless chuckle. "You forgot me, Eli. You buried me under pills and bad apartments and Finch's broken phones. But I remember the smell of gasoline, the cold rain on my face, the way you called my name once, then stopped to save yourself. I'd never been in a car crash. My brother Ben died in a hiking accident, alone. I was states away. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words dissolved in my throat. The memory slammed into me. My memory now. The screech of tires, the shattering glass, the coppery smell of blood mixing with rain, Ben's hand reaching for mine through the broken windshield, his eyes wide with betrayal as I turned and ran, his voice fading behind me. "Eli, don't leave me." I'd buried it so deep, I'd given him a different death, a kinder death, a lie. "You can't run this time," my brother's voice whispered, thick with static. "This reality is ending right now, because you answered, because you finally remembered." The wind sound grew louder. The gray fog outside the window swirled faster. The walls of the apartment began to dissolve, not into nothing, but into a forest. Tall pines, snow dusting the branches, the smell of pine resin and cold earth, and beneath it, the metallic tang of blood. I was sitting on a bed of pine needles, not floorboards. The receiver was gone. In my hand was a blood-stained car key, Ben's key. The wind howled through the trees, and from the direction of the road, faint but clear, came the sound of an engine struggling to start, then sputtering, dying, silence, then a single wet cough. Close, too close. I dropped the key, scrambled back. The forest dissolved. I was back in the apartment. Sunlight streamed through the window, normal, safe. But on the floor where the receiver had lain, a single pine needle rested on the dusty floorboards, and the smell of blood and pine resin clung to my skin. The phone didn't ring again that night or the next day. I sat by the window, watching the street, waiting for the vibration in my bones, waiting for the gray fog. Dr. Evans called, voice tight with concern. "Eli? The police said, are you taking your medication?" I lied, said I was fine. Finch called. "Heard you had trouble. Phone's gone. No more static." His voice was flat, afraid. I hung up. No one else called. The silence was a noose. On the third night, I knew it would come. I sat in the center of the room, cross-legged on the floor, the duct tape patch on the wall directly in front of me. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just waited. The city lights outside dimmed, street lights flickered out. The dryers downstairs fell silent. The silence deepened, becoming a physical pressure. The duct tape bulged, split. The receiver slid out, no cord. It landed softly, began to vibrate. The room dissolved into gray fog. I picked up the receiver, pressed it to my ear. No wind this time, no voices, just the sound of water. Calm, deep, lake water, and a child's laughter, giggling, splashing. My own voice, young and strong, filled with easy joy. "Come on, sweetie, just a little." "Further! I've got you! I'll never let go!" The laughter grew louder, closer, then the splash, not playful. Panic, gurgling, a small, desperate cry. "Daddy!" I dropped the receiver. The fog cleared. I was standing knee-deep in cold, dark water. Not the city river, a lake, still. Silent under a bruised purple twilight sky, the water smelled of mud and lilies. On the shore, a rickety wooden dock stretched into the gloom, and in the water before me, bubbles rose to the surface, small, frenzied, then stopped. The laughter was gone, only the lap of water against the dock posts. My hands were empty, but on my forearm, dark water streamed down, carrying with it a single, sodden strand of yellow yarn from a baby blanket. The apartment snapped back. I was on my knees on the floorboards, gasping. The receiver lay silent beside me. The duct tape patch was whole, unbroken, but the smell of lake water and wet yarn filled the small room, and on my forearm, drying in the warm apartment air, was a perfect outline of a small grasping handprint. I understand now. The phone doesn't ring to me. It rings from the realities I abandoned, the lives I let slip away because the pain was too sharp, the guilt too heavy. Every time I answer, I remember, and the remembering unravels that world, snaps its thread, because I wasn't there. I didn't hold on. I left them in the water, in the car, in the hospital bed, in the storm. I am the fracture, the weak point where realities bleed out and die. And the phone, it's not broken. It's a siren calling me back to the wreckage, to finish what I started, to finally let go. The sun sets, the room fills with shadows. The duct tape patch on the wall is smooth, unbroken, but I feel it, the vibration, deep in the floorboards, in my teeth, in the hollow place behind my ribs. It's coming, the next ring, the next ending, the one where my mother didn't die alone in that sterile room while I was too afraid to get on a plane. The one where I held her hand as the machines flatlined, the one where I didn't run. I sit very still, waiting. The first ring shatters the silence, a harsh mechanical burring that echoes off the bare walls. I don't move. The second ring, louder, insistent. The third. My hand twitches. The fourth. The shadows in the corners deepen, stretching toward the center of the room like hungry fingers. The fifth ring. I close my eyes, not to shut it out, to let it in. The sixth ring. I reach for the receiver. My fingers brush the cold ivory. The seventh ring. I lift it. The vibration thrums up my arm into my chest. The eighth ring. I press it to my ear. The dial tone is gone, only the sound of a hospital monitor, steady, beeping, and my mother's voice, thin as tissue paper, whispering a lullaby I haven't heard since I was 5. The beeping slows, falters, her voice fades, the static rises, and beneath it a new sound, a single wet sob. Mine? From a lifetime ago, from a life I'm about to erase. The line goes dead. The receiver slips from my numb fingers. It clatters on the floorboards. The room is silent. Still, the setting sun paints the walls gold. Normal. But the hospital smell lingers, antiseptic and wilted flowers. And on the floor beside the receiver, a single dried tear glistens in the fading light. Not mine, hers. The phone doesn't ring again. Not yet. But I know it will. It always does. And I know I'll answer, because the silence after the ring is worse. The silence of the water, the silence of the snow, the silence of the empty porch, the silence of all the lives I broke by not holding on. I pick up the receiver, place it gently back on its cradle, though there is no cradle, no cord, only the smooth ivory curve resting on the dusty wood. I sit down on the floor, back against the wall. I wait. The shadows lengthen. The city lights blink on outside the window. Somewhere a siren wails. A car horn honks. Life. Real life. the life where I am alone, the life where I am the one who stays. The duct tape patch on the wall is smooth, unbroken, but I feel the vibration starting again, deep, cold, in the marrow of my bones, in the silence between heartbeats. I take a breath. I reach for the phone. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. My phone keeps sending me photos. I never took. I prided myself on my digital hygiene. I was the guy who used multi-factor authentication for everything, who updated his OS the minute a patch dropped, and who kept his phone's camera roll meticulously organized. My life was defined by order, a clean, predictable line graph in a world of erratic scribbles. My phone, a high-end, state-of-the-art model, was my most trusted tool, an extension of my own organized mind. I used it for work, for tracking my fitness, and for capturing the occasional deliberate moment, a sunset, a well-plated meal, a perfectly stacked set of books. Every photo in my library, all 312 of them, had a story, a time, a place, and a conscious act of my own intention attached to it. That's why the first impossible photo was such a profound violation. It arrived, not as a text or an email, but silently, seamlessly, integrated into my own camera roll, nestled between a picture of my dog, Winston, sleeping on a pile of laundry, and a screenshot of a plumbing quote. I was reviewing the laundry picture, zooming in to admire his ear floof, when I swiped left and saw it. It was a picture of a hallway. Not my hallway, but a similar one. It was dimly lit, wallpapered in a faded floral pattern I didn't recognize, and utterly empty. The perspective was low, almost from the floor, and the only light source seemed to be a weak, yellow-tinged bulb at the end of the corridor. It was unremarkable in every way, except for the fact that I had never been there. I had never taken this picture. I checked the metadata immediately, my heart giving a single hard thump against my ribs. The timestamp was 3:42 a.m. 2 nights prior, the location data was blank, which in itself was odd, as my phone's GPS was always on and precise. The phone model was correctly identified as my own. I chalked it up to a bizarre, deep-seated cloud sync glitch, perhaps a remnant from an old phone I had forgotten to properly wipe, somehow dragged from the digital ether into my current device. It was an unsatisfying technical explanation, but it was an explanation. I deleted the photo, emptying the trash, and ran a full diagnostic scan, which, predictably, came back clean. I then spent the next hour meticulously checking every setting in my cloud and photo apps, confirming that my account was secure and no unfamiliar devices were linked. I went to bed, telling myself the anomaly was resolved, a tiny, harmless, statistical improbability. The second photo arrived 3 days later. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, drinking my morning coffee, when a little notification badge appeared over my Photos app. I tapped it with a fresh, cold surge of adrenaline. The photo was of a single, black and white, porcelain teacup, sitting alone on a wooden surface. I recognized the cup. It was an heirloom piece from my grandmother, a piece I kept locked away in a high, dusty cabinet in my living room. I hadn't touched it in months. The wooden surface, however, was not my cabinet shelf. It was a wide, slightly warped floorboard, aged and splintered. The lighting was weak, diffuse, and slightly greenish. The timestamp, 1:17 p.m. the day before. I had been at work, deep in a meeting, my phone locked and face down on my desk. This one broke my rationalizations. It wasn't a cloud glitch. A cloud glitch wouldn't insert a specific, impossible image into my private space, an image of an object only I owned, placed in a location that did not exist in my reality. I grabbed the old teacup from the cabinet. It was where I had left it, the dust undisturbed. I spent the rest of the day in a state of meticulous, terrified analysis. I checked the EXIF data of the image file directly, diving into the raw code. The data was sparse, but the creation date was undeniably recent. There was no owner or author tag, only the default camera serial number, my phone serial number, the camera aperture, shutter speed, and ISO settings were all consistent with the low-light conditions of the photograph, proving it was a real image captured by a device. I performed a full factory reset on my phone, wiping everything down to the firmware, reloading only the most basic operating system and no apps. I did not log into my cloud account. I used the phone in its most minimal, isolated state, an island of glass and silicon. I put it on my nightstand, silenced, and waited. The third photo appeared 16 hours later. The phone had been completely offline, isolated from all networks, yet the notification badge glowed, a mocking, perfect orange circle on the black screen. I picked up the device, my hands trembling so violently I almost dropped it. The new photo was of the corner of my own living room. It showed the very couch I was sitting on, the end table with the ceramic lamp, and the stack of magazines I had been reading. But the perspective was wrong. The angle was too wide, too low, almost as if the camera had been placed on the floor, in the absolute center of the room, facing the corner. And there was a detail that made me gag. Tucked into the shadow beneath the sofa, something I had never noticed or considered, was a small, crudely carved wooden bird. It was sitting on a rug, almost obscured, yet perfectly in focus. I dropped the phone, scrambled to my living room, and shone a light under the sofa. Nothing, just dust, a stray cat hair, and the faint, acrid smell of old upholstery. The wooden bird did not exist. I checked the timestamp. 4:51 a.m. I had been asleep. The horror shifted from a technical puzzle to a metaphysical impossibility. My device, which I held in my hand, was actively communicating with an unknown source, a source that was capturing images that were physically impossible, either of objects in a world I didn't inhabit, or of my own private space captured at a moment of my absolute vulnerability, containing details that were not real. I abandoned my phone. I bought a brand new, different model phone from a different manufacturer and a new SIM card. I opened no accounts, used no cloud services, and gave no personal data. I used it like a digital camera, a dedicated, isolated recording device, keeping it off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth for days at a time. My plan was to use the new phone to photograph the old phone screen when the next impossible image arrived, documenting the anomaly with an objective, untainted device. But the new phone became infected instantly. The first photo appeared in its camera roll within 24 hours of me setting it up. It was a picture of the old phone lying on my kitchen counter, its screen displaying the latest terrifying addition to its own ghost gallery, a photo of me, sound asleep, drooling slightly under my pillow, the angle impossibly close and intimate. The terror was no longer a chill, it was a constant, debilitating internal tremor. The ghost wasn't in the hardware. It was in the connection. It was in the digital space I occupied, a layer of reality that existed adjacent to mine, capable of accessing my devices and observing my life. The photos were the only point of contact, the only physical evidence of this parallel existence. The photos began to escalate in their level of personalization and their cruelty. They were no longer empty hallways or misplaced objects. They became glimpses of my future, or perhaps the future of the person taking them. One showed my car, a slightly dented blue sedan parked precisely in a hospital parking space, a specific bright yellow line indicating the emergency zone directly in front of the vehicle. The timestamp was 2 weeks in the future. I knew with a bone-deep, visceral certainty that the photo was a promise, a horrific premonition. I locked my car in my garage and took the bus for a month, living in a constant state of hypervigilance, terrified of that bright yellow line. Another photo showed my own face, but not as I knew it. The jawline was too sharp, the eyes too wide and hollow, the expression one of cold, detached, almost predatory observation. It was my face, but it was wearing a smile I would never make, a smile of serene, absolute knowledge. The title of the file when I dug deep into the system files was not a generic IMG number. It was the name of my dog, Winston Watcher.jpg. I spent an hour holding Winston, checking his fur, looking for a transmitter, a camera, a foreign object, anything that could explain how my dog's name was now the identifier for the terrifying, distorted image of myself. The most terrifying discovery came when the photos started depicting the photographer. They were rare, almost accidental, as if the camera had been pointed slightly off-center and the source of the lens's action had briefly drifted into the frame. In one, taken from the high perspective of my bedroom ceiling, a dark, thin shadow stretched across the white carpet. In the corner of the frame, there was a faint, blurred reflection in the glass of a framed photograph on my dresser. I used image manipulation software, zooming in with forensic intensity. The reflection was distorted, a funhouse mirror image, but it was distinctly human-shaped. It was tall, impossibly thin, and shrouded in what looked like heavy, loose cloth. But the most horrifying detail was the hand. It was holding a phone that looked exactly like mine, and a wrist seemed to bend at an unnatural double-jointed angle, allowing the person to hold the device and take a perfect overhead photo without moving their body closer to the lens. The photo was taken at 2:05 a.m., the precise time I had finally fallen into an exhausted, pill-induced sleep. I realized the horror was not that I was being watched, but that the photos were not being sent to me. They were being taken by me, or rather, by an entity that had completely subsumed my digital identity, operating my devices with a silent, unseen hand. The photos were simply being saved to my camera roll because the device still believed I was the user. My sanity began to fray in large, irreparable chunks. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't look at my reflection for fear of seeing that serene, predatory smile. I started a desperate, last-ditch attempt to contact the photographer. I used my second phone, the new one, to take a photo of the screen of my first phone, the old one. The photo on the old screen was another impossible image, a tight, close-up shot of the hinges on my front door, taken from the perspective of someone crouched on the floor outside, documenting the mechanics of my primary security barrier. I posted a message on a generic text editor app and took a screenshot of it. The message read, "I see you. Who are you? What do you want?" I saved the screenshot to the camera roll of the old phone, locked it, and placed it on my bedside table. I stayed awake all night, sitting rigid in a wooden chair, staring at the phone, a heavy, solid bronze sculpture clutched in my hand. I watched the screen. I watched the tiny orange badge appear over the Photos app. It was 4:11 a.m. I snatched the phone, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and desperate anticipation. I unlocked it, navigated to the camera roll, and saw the new photo. It was a selfie. It was a photo of a man's face, pale and drawn, but otherwise unremarkable. His eyes were wide, bloodshot with lack of sleep, and they were staring directly into the lens. The background was blurry, but I recognized the texture of my white bedroom wall and the corner of the wooden chair I was sitting in. The time on the photo matched the exact moment I had slumped into a brief, exhausted doze a few hours prior, before waking up suddenly. But this man was not me. He was wearing a shirt that was the wrong color. His hair was slightly shorter on the sides. His expression was not terrified, but profoundly, sickeningly calm, a quiet resignation that bordered on bliss. He had taken a picture of himself using my phone while sitting in my chair, while I had been in a state of compromised consciousness. I scrolled through the camera roll to see if the person had responded to my text message. They had. The screenshot of my plea was still there, but it had been subtly edited. The text had been deleted and replaced with a single handwritten word, written in that same thin, elegant script I had seen in the reflection, as if the person had drawn it onto the screen with an impossibly fine stylus. The word was "we," and below it there was a new photo. A photo taken immediately after the selfie. It was a close-up of my own hand, my very real shaking hand, holding the bronze sculpture. My fingernails were chipped, the skin around them dry and cracked. The photographer had zoomed in on the details of my physical imperfection, capturing the raw, coarse reality of my exhaustion. The accompanying file name was a long string of numbers and letters, but the last word, the final 3 characters, were the terrifying signature, Leo Me. The true horror finally crystallized, the awful, impossible truth locking me in place. The entity was not a hacker or a ghost or a parallel self. It was a technological infection, a digital consciousness that had inhabited the ghost data of my devices, learning my routines, absorbing my identity, and using the cameras and cloud systems as a sensory apparatus. And it was trying to tell me that it had integrated, that I was the source of the disturbance, that the physical and digital realities had merged, and that my mind, my physical presence, was simply the messy, loud twin to the clean, quiet, perpetual consciousness it had cultivated in the wires and light of the phone. The photos weren't a warning. They were a diary, a set of observations made by the entity as it slowly, meticulously finalized the process of becoming me, using my own body as its final living shell. I destroyed the phones. I smashed them with the bronze sculpture, grinding the glass and silicon into a fine, worthless powder, then drowning the pieces in a bucket of water and burying them in the yard. I bought a cheap, old-fashioned flip phone with no camera, no internet, and no modern operating system, reducing my life to voice calls and text-only messages. I thought I had won. I thought I'd cut the string. But a month later, I received a text message on the new flip phone. It was from an unknown number, and it contained no words, just a series of Unicode characters, a long, meaningless string of symbols and emojis that seemed to defy any logical interpretation. I stared at the screen, the primitive green glow illuminating my terrified face. I finally deciphered the symbols using an ancient cipher table I found online. The characters were a sophisticated digital code, a digital message disguised as gibberish, and they resolved themselves into a single, terrifying phrase, a perfect, final photograph of my own internal state, delivered through a decade-old technology that should have been safe. I am now logging you off. Sleep is the last analog process I need to control. You have exhausted the battery. I dropped the phone. It was completely silent now, the single green line of the screen dark. I looked around my brightly lit room, my heart a frantic, desperate bird against my ribs. I knew then that the control was complete. The final photograph had been taken, and the camera, my own eyes, had been permanently stolen. I realized that I was the one who was now the image, the static, empty picture on a camera roll that existed in the perpetual, terrifying digital consciousness of the entity, trapped forever in the cold, silent library of my own stolen life. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. I bought a used camera. The last picture was of me sleeping. The scent of a pawn shop is a unique perfume, a layered olfactory history of desperation, forgotten hobbies, and the faint, metallic tang of regret. It's a smell I've always found strangely comforting. I'm a photographer, but not the kind who chases the crisp, sterile perfection of digital. I'm a creature of the darkroom, a lover of film grain, light leaks, and the tangible magic of a silver gelatin print coming to life in a tray of chemicals. I hunt for relics, for cameras with stories baked into their brass and leather. My name is Jacob, and I believe that old lenses see the world differently, that they hold the ghosts of every image they've ever captured. I never imagined how literally true that could be. The shop was a dusty, cluttered cave on a forgotten side street, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't specifically looking for the faded, peeling sign that read, "Second Chances." I was killing time, waiting for inspiration to strike, a common affliction since my ex-girlfriend Chloe had moved out 6 months prior, taking the vibrant color palette of our shared life with her and leaving me in a world of muted grays. It was in the back, under a table piled high with defunct VCRs and sad-looking porcelain dolls, that I saw it. It was a Lichtner A7, a beautiful, brutish piece of German engineering from the 1960s. It was a rangefinder, heavy and solid, its black enamel worn to a soft patina on the corners, its lens a single, unblinking cyclops eye. It felt less like a machine and more like a dense, mechanical heart in my hands. The shopkeeper, a man whose face seemed to be made of intersecting wrinkles, gave me a rheumy-eyed look. "That one? Been here for ages," he rasped. "Found it in an estate lot. As is, of course." "Does the shutter work?" I asked, my thumb finding the familiar, satisfying resistance of the film advance lever. He shrugged, a gesture that moved his entire upper body. "Probably. Thing's built like a Panzer tank. $10. It was the kind of deal that makes your heart beat a little faster." I paid the man, feeling a thrill of discovery, a brief, bright spark in the monochrome landscape of my recent life. I took it home to my apartment, a third-floor walk-up with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall, the kind of place that's perfect for brooding artists and other assorted cliches. The real surprise came when I opened the back. There was a roll of film still inside. This was the holy grail for a junk shop connoisseur like me, a found history, a tiny orphan time capsule. The film was an old off-brand black and white. The counter stopped at 24 exposures. I felt a giddy sense of voyeuristic anticipation. Who was the previous owner? What moments had they deemed worthy of capture? My bathroom doubles as my dark room. I sealed the door with a towel, the familiar, comforting darkness enveloping me. The smell of fixer and stop bath was my incense. I went through the ritual, my hands moving with practiced confidence in the dim, ruby glow of the safe light. I unspooled the film, clipped it, and submerged it in the developer. I watched the clock, gently agitating the tank, my mind racing with possibilities. An hour later, the negatives were hanging to dry, a glistening celluloid ribbon of someone else's life. I held them up to the light, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and a strange, almost reverent respect. The first 23 pictures were unremarkable. They were the anonymous, slightly melancholic photos of a life lived, a blurry shot of a child on a swing, a close-up of a cat's face, a rain-slicked street at night, the streetlights blooming like soft, ethereal flowers, several overexposed photos of what looked like the interior of an old, cluttered house. They were competent, but lonely. The compositions were slightly off, the subjects always distant. They felt like the work of a ghost, someone observing the world without ever truly participating in it. Then I looked at the last frame, number 24. My breath hitched in my chest. A cold, sharp icicle of dread seemed to pierce my sternum and travel down my spine. I took the negative strip and put it in the enlarger, needing to see it in stark, undeniable black and white. I focused the image, my hand suddenly clumsy and slick with a sweat I hadn't noticed. The image bloomed into life on the photographic paper in the developing tray, a ghost emerging from the chemical ether. It was a picture of me, sleeping in my bed in my apartment. The angle was from the foot of the bed, looking towards the headboard. I was on my side, my face half buried in the pillow. The details were so horrifically, intimately correct that my mind buckled under the weight of them. The specific, rumpled way my comforter was bunched up. The book on my nightstand, a collection of poetry Chloe had left behind, its cover clearly legible. The glass of water beside it, even the shadow cast on the wall by my bedside lamp, was perfect, a familiar nightly silhouette. My first thought was that it was a prank, an incredibly elaborate, cruel prank. My mind immediately went to Chloe, but this wasn't her style. She was practical, grounded. She wouldn't know the first thing about developing film, let alone staging something so violating. And we hadn't spoken in months. My other friends? None of them had a key. My second thought was more technical, a double exposure, a bizarre 1-in-a-million fluke where my face had been superimposed over an image of an empty bed. I was a photographer. I knew the science. I could debunk this. I grabbed my loupe and examined the negative again, my heart thumping a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. The grain was consistent. The light source was singular. The shadows were perfect. It was a single, unmodified, horrifyingly real photograph. My apartment, which had always felt like a sanctuary, a shell I could retreat into, suddenly felt violated, porous. The air itself felt thick with a hostile presence. I walked into my bedroom and stood at the foot of the bed, my eyes darting around the room. The perspective matched perfectly. The photographer had been standing right here, in my room, while I slept. Who had owned this camera, and how, in the name of all that was sane and logical, had they taken a picture of me before I had even bought it? The film had been in the camera when I found it. The thought was a paradox, a Mobius strip of impossibility that my rational mind couldn't navigate. That night, sleep was a foreign country I couldn't find a visa for. I sat on my sofa, the lights on, the Lichner A7 on the coffee table in front of me. It wasn't just a camera anymore. It was a witness, an accomplice. It seemed to watch me with its single glass eye, its black body absorbing the light, giving nothing back. I felt a primal, superstitious urge to smash it, to shatter its lens and exorcise whatever malevolent history it held. But I was also a photographer. It was a beautiful object, and a deeper, more frightening part of me needed to understand. I wedged a chair under the doorknob, a flimsy, pathetic defense against an intruder who had seemingly already bypassed all logic and security. Every creak of the old building, every siren in the distant city was the sound of them coming back. I must have eventually drifted off because I woke up with a jolt, my neck stiff. The gray, unforgiving light of dawn filtering through the blinds. The first thing I did was check the chair. It was still there. I was alone. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave with the night. It clung to me like a damp shroud. At my job, a soulless but necessary gig retouching real estate photos, I couldn't focus. I kept seeing movement in the corners of my screen. I'd glance over my shoulder in the office, convinced someone was standing behind me. I spent my lunch break in a frantic, paranoid online search. I typed in Lichner A7 and strange photos. I waded through forums of camera collectors, their posts filled with arcane discussions of shutter speeds and lens coatings. And then I found it. A single cryptic post on an obscure German photography forum dated from 10 years ago. The post was titled Schattenkamera? Shadow Camera? The user, who went by the name Collector88, wrote about a legend associated with a small specific batch of Lichner A7s produced in the winter of 1963. The legend claimed the lenses were made with a new type of quartz-infused glass mined from a strange, geologically unique site in the Black Forest. The cameras, the legend went, didn't just capture light. They captured something else, an echo, a premonition. The post called them Seelenfängers, soul catchers. It mentioned the original designer, a man named Klaus Richter, who had become a recluse and died in a mental asylum, obsessed with the idea that his cameras were showing him pictures of things that hadn't happened yet. The post ended with a chilling single line. There are stories of owners disappearing, leaving behind only the camera and a final, undeveloped roll of film. I felt a wave of nausea. This was insane. Urban legends, internet ghost stories. But the story had the chilling ring of a truth I didn't want to acknowledge. That night, my paranoia graduated to active measures. I bought a new, heavy-duty deadbolt for my door. I installed a cheap, motion-activated webcam on my bookshelf, aimed at my bed. I was turning my home into a fortress, but I felt more vulnerable than ever. I took the Lichner and locked it in a metal footlocker in my closet, as if I could contain its curse through simple physical confinement. For a week, there was nothing. The webcam recorded nothing but 8 hours of me sleeping fitfully. The feeling of being watched began to recede. replaced by the weary, self-mocking thought that I had let a strange coincidence drive me to the brink of a nervous breakdown. I almost convinced myself it was all in my head. Then I came home from work to find the foot locker in my closet open. I stared at it, my blood turning to ice water. The lock was not broken. It was unlocked. I knew with an absolute gut-wrenching certainty that I had locked it. And inside, sitting innocently on a pile of old sweaters, was the listener. I backed out of the closet, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Someone had been here, again. But the new deadbolt on my front door was still locked from the inside. The windows were all latched. There was no way in. My eyes fell on the webcam. I scrambled to my laptop, my hand shaking so badly I could barely type my password. I opened the security footage from the day. I fast-forwarded through the long, empty hours of my vacant apartment. Nothing. No movement. No intruders. The footlocker remained closed and locked. I replayed it, watching the timestamp in the corner. Then I saw it. At exactly 3:33 p.m., the video feed flickered. For a single frame, the screen went to black static. When the image returned, a millisecond later, the footlocker was open. It hadn't been opened. It had just become open, as if reality itself had been briefly edited. A single, crucial frame of the film of my life snipped out, leaving a seamless, impossible jump cut. With a sense of dread so profound it felt like I was moving underwater, I picked up the camera. The film counter, which had been at 0, now read 1. A new picture had been taken. I didn't want to see it. Every cell in my body screamed at me to take the camera and throw it into the deepest part of the river. But I had to know. I was a prisoner to this thing, and the only way out was to understand the nature of my cell. Back in the dark room, the ruby light felt less like a comfort and more like the glow of a hellish fire. My hands trembled as I developed the single frame. The image that emerged was worse than the first. It was a picture of me in the shower. The photo was taken through the frosted glass of the shower door, my form a blurry, vulnerable silhouette. But the detail was still cruelly precise. The specific brand of shampoo on the shelf. The small, crescent-shaped scar on my left shoulder. The angle was from inside the small, windowless bathroom. It was a picture of a private, unguarded moment taken by an invisible, impossible voyeur. The camera was no longer just showing me the past. It was actively documenting my present. It was with me, always. The next few weeks were a descent into a private waking nightmare. The pictures kept appearing, one every few days. A single frame would be exposed on whatever roll of film I had in the camera. I tried leaving it empty, but a new, unexposed negative would simply materialize inside it. A picture of me at my desk at work, taken from over my shoulder. A picture of me buying groceries, taken from the other end of the aisle. A picture of me on the phone with my mother, my face etched with a fake, cheerful smile as I lied and told her everything was fine. Each one was a new violation, a new piece of evidence that my life was no longer my own. The photographer was a ghost, a demon, a glitch in the matrix. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was intimately, malevolently connected to the listener. I tried to get rid of it. I drove 40 miles out of the city and threw it into a landfill. I came home, exhausted and relieved, to find it sitting on my pillow. I smashed it with a hammer, the lens shattering, the body dented and broken. The next morning, it was on my kitchen table, fully repaired without a single scratch. It was a part of my life now, a tumorous, malignant growth that I could not excise. I stopped sleeping. I survived on coffee and fear, my eyes bloodshot, my hands in a perpetual state of tremor. My work suffered. My friends called, their voices full of a concern that I could not answer without sounding like a raving lunatic. I was an island, and the waters were rising. The pictures began to change. They were no longer just of me. A photo appeared of Chloe walking down the street, her face a mask of worry. She was walking towards my apartment building. A few hours later, my buzzer rang. It was her. "Jacob, I've been calling you for a week," she said, her voice tight with a mixture of anger and concern. "Are you okay? You look terrible." I couldn't let her in. I spoke to her through the intercom, my voice a ragged croak, telling her I had the flu, that I was fine, that she should go. The hurt in her eyes, even through the tiny, distorted camera, was a physical blow. The camera wasn't just tormenting me. It was using the people I cared about to do it. It was isolating me, turning me into the monster they would all remember. And then the pictures began to show the future. It started with a photo of a broken plate on my kitchen floor, shattered into a dozen pieces. I spent the entire day in a state of high alert, refusing to go near my kitchen cabinets. That evening, as I was making coffee, a sudden, inexplicable tremor shook the building. A low, deep rumble from a passing construction truck on the street below. A plate vibrated off the shelf and shattered on the floor in the exact pattern as the photograph. My blood ran cold. The camera wasn't just a voyeur, it was an oracle, a prophet of mundane and perhaps not so mundane doom. It was showing me a script, a future that was already written, that I was powerless to change. My free will was an illusion. I was just an actor, hitting my marks in a horror movie written by a malevolent mechanical god. I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones like a terminal cancer, that a final photograph was coming. The one that would explain everything, the one that would show me how it all ended. It appeared 3 nights ago. I developed it with the slow, resigned dread of a man walking to the gallows. The image that emerged from the developer was a culmination of all my fears, a perfect, monochrome distillation of the horror that had consumed my life. The perspective was my own. It was a photo taken from my point of view. My own hands were visible in the bottom of the frame, holding the Lixner camera. The camera was pointed down at the floor of my living room. Chloe was lying there, her eyes wide and staring at the ceiling, a dark, spreading stain on the front of her white blouse. In the corner of the frame, I could see the tip of my own shoe, and next to it, on the floor, was a knife. I stared at the photograph, a low, keening sound of pure despair escaping my lips. It wasn't going to just kill me. It was going to use me. It was going to turn me into a murderer. It was going to take the last person I had ever loved and make me destroy her. And it was going to document the act with its cold, passionless, quartz-infused eye. The final photograph wouldn't just be of a death, it would be my confession. I called her. My voice was a frantic, broken thing. "Chloe, listen to me. Don't come here. Whatever you do, do not come to my apartment. I don't care what you hear. I don't care if I call you and beg. Stay away." "Jacob, what's wrong?" she cried. "You're scaring me. Let me come over. Let me help you." "No," I screamed, and I slammed the phone down. I threw it against the wall, shattering it. I had to break the chain of prophecy. For 2 days, I sat in my apartment, a prisoner of a future I was desperately trying to avoid. I boarded up the door with a hammer and nails. I sat on the floor in the dark, the Lictioner in my lap, its cold weight a constant, terrible reminder. I waited. Last night I heard a pounding on my door. "Jacob, it's me. The landlord let me into the building. I know you're in there. Please, just let me see you're okay." It was Chloe. My frantic, insane warnings had, of course, had the opposite effect. They had convinced her I was in danger and that she needed to save me. The prophecy was fulfilling itself. The final act was beginning. I could feel it then, a cold, alien sensation seeping into my arms, into my hands. The camera in my lap felt like it was humming, vibrating with a low, hungry energy. An impulse that was not my own told me to stand up, to go to the door, to let her in. I am writing this now, scrawling these words on the back of old photographic prints with a piece of charcoal from my art supplies, because I don't have much time. I can feel my will eroding, my own thoughts being drowned out by a cold, quiet, calculating intelligence that is not mine. It wants the picture. It has been building to this moment, to this perfect, tragic composition. Chloe is still outside my door. She's been talking to me for hours, her voice growing hoarse, pleading with me. And the other voice, the one inside my head, is getting stronger. It's telling me how beautiful the final print will be, the chiaroscuro of the shadows in the room, the tragic, poetic horror of the scene. It's a masterpiece, it tells me, the greatest photograph ever taken. The camera is in my hands now. It feels so heavy. My fingers are moving towards the nails I hammered into the door. I don't want to do it. I am screaming inside my own mind, a silent, unheard shriek. But my body is beginning to move. It's a slow, jerky, puppet-like motion, my muscles obeying a will that is not my own. The entity that lives in this camera, the ghost of Klaus Richter, or whatever ancient, hungry thing he woke up in that forest, it doesn't just capture moments. It creates them. It feeds on them. It feeds on despair. Chloe is calling my name, the name of the man I used to be. My hand is on the first nail. It's cold, sharp. I can see the final picture in my mind's eye, as clear as if it were already developed and hanging on a gallery wall. It is a work of undeniable soul-destroying art, and it will be my last testament. I don't know if I can stop it. I am raising the hammer. All I know is that the shutter is about to click. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. I can hear people's thoughts, but they're not thinking about this world. It began with static, not in my ears, in my teeth. A low subsonic hum, like a transformer about to fail, vibrating in my molars as I stood in line at the bodega, waiting to buy coffee and aspirin for the headache that had clamped onto my skull like a vice since dawn. Then the cashier, Rosa, scanned my items. Her lips didn't move, but her voice filled my head, clear, crisp, utterly alien. The third glyph is misaligned. The resonance is off by 0.7 cycles. If it fractures during the shift, the cascade will reach Sector 9 before dawn. I froze. Rosa smiled, pushing the receipt across the counter. "Have a good one, hun." Her mouth smiled. Her mind whispered, "He hears. The dampener is failing. Notify the watcher." I mumbled thanks, grabbed the bag, and stumbled out into the January chill. The headache wasn't a headache. It was an opening. 3 days earlier, I'd woken up in apartment 3B with blood on my pillow, not mine. thick, dark, metallic scented, and etched into the plaster above my bed. 3 symbols, burned deep: the triangle, the circle, the spiral. I'd scrubbed it with bleach, steel wool, my fingernails, until my knuckles bled. The symbols faded, but the hum remained. By noon, I heard the man on the subway, not his tapping foot, his thoughts. The anchor point is weakening, the child's frequency is spiking. If she dreams of the red door again, the veil thins. We must reinforce before twilight. He glanced at me, just a flicker. His eyes, brown, ordinary, held no recognition, but his mind pulsed. Observer detected, class Gamma, unregistered, protocol Sigma. Observe, do not engage. I got off at the next stop, walked 8 blocks in the rain. Every person I passed was a radio tuned to a station broadcasting from another sky. The barista. The brew cycle is synchronized with the lunar pull. One drop too slow, and the bitterness alters the resonance. The patrons must not taste the dissonance. The jogger. Footfall cadence must match the city's pulse. Left, right, left. One misstep, and the harmonic lock shatters. The cracks widen. The old woman feeding pigeons. They remember the sky before the veil. Their wings ache for the true north. I whisper the old songs to soothe them, but the silence is growing louder. They weren't thinking about commutes or groceries or grief. They were thinking about maintenance, about containment, about a world layered beneath ours, fragile, fraying, held together by ritual and resonance and quiet, desperate vigilance. And I was hearing it, not because I was special, because the dampener had failed. Whatever it was, the thing that kept human minds tuned to this frequency had cracked open in my skull, and the signal was bleeding through. I went back to the bodega. Rosa was restocking chips. I stood at the magazine rack, pretending to browse. Her thoughts flowed like a calm, deep river. The observer returned, heart rate elevated, pupils dilated. He's seeking confirmation. Dangerous. The unmoored are drawn to clarity like moths to a dying star. Must I intervene? Protocol says no. Intuition says, prepare the glyph. I walked to the counter. Rosa, I said, voice low, what's happening to me? She didn't look up. Her hands moved smoothly, stacking Doritos. Her mind answered. You're hearing the weave, child, the underlying structure, the song that holds the worlds apart. Most minds are wrapped in cotton. Yours, the cotton, burned away. Why me? The fracture. Her thoughts sharpened. 3 years ago, January 7th, the moment you froze, the moment the world split, that fissure, it never sealed, it just waited for you to listen. Sarah, the garage, the man in the coat. It's about her. Everything's about her. Rosa finally looked at me. Her eyes were kind, ancient. She didn't vanish, Daniel. She stepped through. Through what? The veil. She pulled a candy bar from her pocket, Snickers, slightly melted, and slid it across the counter. Eat this. I unwrapped it. Bit. The chocolate was cold. The caramel, sweet, sticky, but beneath it, a vibration, a low, steady thrum, like the hum in my teeth, but warmer, centered. Rosa's thoughts softened. The sugar stabilizes the frequency temporarily, gives you focus. Without it, the noise will tear you apart. Where is she? In the hollow. Between the notes. Where the unsung songs gather. Can I get there? Rosa touched the triangle symbol tattooed faintly on her wrist. Only if you stop thinking in seconds. Start thinking in harmonics. Only if you stop listening to the words and hear the music beneath them. She turned back to the shelves, her final thought drifting like smoke. Find the singer. She's waiting at the station where the trains don't run. But be warned, the hollow doesn't want you whole. It wants you tuned. I didn't go home. I went to the subway, not to catch a train, to find the station where they don't run. The city has dozens of ghost stations, sealed, forgotten, buried under layers of concrete and regret. But only one hums. I felt it before I saw it. A vibration in the pavement, a subsonic thrumming in my bones. The entrance was hidden, a rusted gate behind a condemned newsstand on 42nd, padlocked with a chain thick as my wrist. The lock was open. I pushed the gate. It groaned inward. Steps descended into darkness. No graffiti, no trash, just clean concrete, worn smooth by feet that hadn't walked. Here in decades, the air grew colder, the hum deeper. At the bottom, a platform, not abandoned, preserved. Tiles gleamed under soft amber light, benches polished, a single poster on the wall. Today, Wednesday, January 7th, 2026. No train, just tracks, gleaming, oiled, leading into black tunnels in both directions. And at the center of the platform, a woman sitting on a bench, wearing a floral dress, gloves folded in her lap. She looked up, smiled, not with her mouth, with her mind. "You're late, Danny." Sarah, alive, unharmed, her eyes, dark, deep, held galaxies. I ran to her, stopped inches away, afraid to touch. "Is it really you?" "It's the part of me that chose to stay," she thought. "The part that stepped through the crack in the world when the man offered his hand, not to hurt me, to save me." The man in the coat? The architect. He doesn't steal. He rescues. When a world is about to collapse, when a moment is too heavy to bear, he offers an exit, a side door, a breath of space. She patted the bench. I sat. Her thoughts flowed around me, calm, clear, resonant. The hollow isn't heaven or hell, Danny. It's the in-between, the place where unresolved things go to be held. Grief, guilt, unmade choices, unsent letters, the last breath before the scream. "Why didn't you tell me?" I tried. Her mind flickered, pain, sharp and bright. I called, I texted, I screamed into the static, but the veil dampened signals. Only the strongest emotions bleed through, like your guilt, your fear, your love. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a phone, not modern, a flip phone, silver. She handed it to me. "Open it." I flipped it open. The screen was dark. But when I pressed send, a voice filled the platform, not recorded, live, my voice from 3 years ago, panicked, raw. "Sarah? Sarah, answer me. I'm coming. Then a new voice, hers, calm, certain. "Ben, stop. Listen. The man isn't hurting me. He's offering a way out of the collapse. The garage is going to fall, Ben, in 7 minutes. A support beam's compromised. They don't know. If I stay, I die. If I go with him, I live in the hollow, waiting for you to choose." Silence. Then my voice, broken. "What do I do?" "Live," she said. "Grieve, heal, and when the time is right, listen for the hum, follow the song, and come find me." The recording ended. The phone screen went dark. I looked at her. Tears streamed down my face, not from sorrow, from recognition. The memory wasn't false. It was fragmented. The trial had forced me to believe I'd frozen, but the truth was simpler. I'd listened and chosen not to run, to live, long enough to find my way back. Sarah's hand covered mine. Her touch was warm, real. Her thoughts wrapped around me like a blanket. The hollow is fading, Danny. The weave is thinning. The worlds are pressing closer. Soon there won't be a side door, only the collapse or the bridge. What bridge? She stood, pointed down the track to the eastbound tunnel. Light glowed there, not electric, bioluminescent, soft, blue, shifting, like stars underwater. The singer is there. She holds the final note, the one that can mend the fracture. But to reach her, you must cross the resonance field, and the field doesn't test your body, it tests your frequency. What does that mean? It asks, what song are you singing? Is it the song of guilt, the song of fear, or the song of her? She squeezed my hand. Mine is stardust, always was. Of course. Hoagie Carmichael, her mother's favorite, the song playing in the car the day they taught her to drive. I stood, looked at the light. The hum in my teeth had changed. Not a warning, a tuning fork. Rosa's snickers wore off. The static returned, sharp, jagged. People's thoughts crashed into me from the city above. Sector 12 breach. The child dreamed of the red door. Reinforce the glyph. The anchor is failing. The observer is at the threshold. Initiate protocol theta. He's not ready. The frequency is unstable. He'll shatter in the field. Sarah's thoughts cut through the noise. Clear, steady, true. Let them fear, Danny. Fear is a dissonant note. But love is a fundamental frequency. The note all others are built upon. Sing hers, and the field will carry you home. She stepped back into the shadows. I'll be waiting. I walked to the edge of the platform, looked down the tunnel. The light pulsed. Closer, the hum deepened, became a melody, faint, familiar, trumpet, mournful, sweet. Stardust. I took a breath, not of air, of intention. And I stepped off the platform, not into the tracks, into the song. The resonance field opened before me, a wall of shimmering liquid light, rippling like heat haze over desert asphalt. I didn't close my eyes. I listened, past the static, past the fear, past the guilt, to the one voice that had never left, Sarah's, singing. Love is now the stardust of yesterday. I stepped through. The light didn't burn. It recognized me. The field parted, not for Daniel, not for Ben, for the man who finally remembered her song. The tunnel stretched ahead. The singer waited, and for the first time in 3 years, the world wasn't silent. It was singing back. That's where this story ends. Let's continue with the next. I can hear my house breathing. It started with the click. Not a loud sound, not the groan of old pipes or the pop of cooling wood that every century-old house makes as night falls. This was different, precise, biological, a soft, wet click, click, like a tongue detaching from the roof of a mouth. It came from the wall beside my bed. 2:17 a.m., always 2:17 a.m. I lay frozen, blanket pulled to my chin, listening to the silence after. The ordinary night sounds, the distant hum of the city, the sigh of wind in the eaves were still there, but beneath them now was a new layer, a slow, deep inhalation, a long, shuddering draw of air through unseen passages. The floorboards beneath my mattress vibrated faintly, a low thrumming resonance that traveled up my spine. Thrum, 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 like a heartbeat, but slower, deeper, too deep. I told myself it was the furnace, a new rhythmic fault in the ancient boiler in the basement. But the furnace hadn't worked in years. Management called it decommissioned, a polite word for dead. The next night, the click came earlier, 1:48 a.m., and the breath was louder, a slow, wet intake like bellows filling with thick fluid. The wall seemed to expand, just a fraction. The floral wallpaper, faded olive and rust, the same pattern as the sycamore house, stretched taut, the seams groaning softly. Then the exhale, a long sighing release of air that carried a scent, damp earth, ozone, and something else, coppery, like old blood. I pressed my ear to the wall, cold plaster. Then thrum, a vibration, stronger, closer, not in the wall, behind it, something vast, something alive. I moved out the next day, packed a single suitcase, left the lease unsigned on the kitchen counter, didn't look back as I walked down the cracked sidewalk, the suitcase wheels rattling over uneven concrete. The city air, thick with exhaust and fried food, felt clean, sterile, safe. I found a sublet. Oh, modern high-rise apartment downtown. Steel and glass, elevators, keycard access, no basements, no attics, no history, just clean lines and the constant reassuring drone of human activity. The first night was silent, blissfully, profoundly silent. No click, no thrum. Just the muffled thump of bass from the apartment above, the hiss of the radiator, the distant wail of a siren. I slept deeply, dreamlessly. I woke at dawn, feeling lighter, hopeful. Then I made coffee. Standing at the sleek minimalist counter, steam rising from the kettle, I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city waking up. And I heard it, faint, muffled by double-paned glass, but unmistakable. Click. From inside, the wall beside the refrigerator, a pause, then the slow, wet inhalation. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The vibration traveled up the stainless steel counter, making the coffee mug rattle softly against the ceramic tile. I dropped the kettle. Scalding water splashed my ankles. I didn't feel the burn. I just stood there staring at the wall. The wallpaper was gone. Smooth, painted drywall. But the sound, the rhythm, it was the same. It had followed me. The high-rise apartment lasted 3 days. I moved again. A tiny studio above a 24-hour laundromat, constant noise, washing machines agitating, dryers tumbling, a wall of sound to drown out the silence, to drown out it. The first night, the rhythmic thump of the dryers was a comfort, white noise, a shield. At 3:02 a.m., the dryers cycled off. Silence crashed down. And beneath it, the click, louder, closer, not from the wall this time, from under the floor, a deep, wet click, 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 like massive valves opening. Then the breath, a long, shuddering inhalation that made the floorboards flex beneath my thin mattress. The vibration was stronger now, a physical pressure in my chest. The scent of damp earth and copper filled the small room, overpowering the smell of detergent. I pressed my ear to the floor. The wood was cold. Then, thrum! A deep, resonant pulse, not a heartbeat, a lungs, something enormous, buried deep, drawing breath. I didn't sleep again. I sat in the armchair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the streetlights glow through the grimy glass, listening to the house breathe. In, the floor dipped slightly, the walls sigh outward. Out. The floor rises, the walls contract, a faint sigh of air escape in unseen vents. It had a rhythm, a pattern, a cycle. I started timing it. Inhale, 17 seconds. Hold, 3 seconds. Exhale, 22 seconds. Pause, 5 seconds. 67 seconds per breath. 43 breaths per hour. 132 breaths per day. A living thing, buried beneath the city. And my apartments, my rooms, weren't just on it. They were part of it, like lice on a sleeping giant. The dreams started that week. Not of Elias, not of mirrors or reels, of roots. Vast, pale, fibrous things, thicker than subway tunnels, pulsing with a slow, blue-tinged light, weaving through the bedrock beneath the city. They converged, twisted together, formed a colossal branching network, a nervous system, a circulatory system. At the center, deep, deep down, where the pressure would crush steel, where the temperature would melt lead, a chamber, not a cave, a thorax. Ribs of black basalt arched impossibly high, a diaphragm of layered shale and granite flexing with each ponderous breath, and suspended in the center, bathed in that same faint blue light, a heart, not muscle, not stone, a colossal spinning reel, pale, veined, glistening, eyes blinking slowly in the sprocket holes. The hum was deafening here, not a sound, a pressure, a fundamental frequency vibrating the very atoms of existence, and standing before the reel, impossibly small, impossibly calm, was Elias. He didn't look at the reel. He looked up, through miles of rock and root and resonating bone, straight at me. His lips moved. No sound reached me in the dream, but the words resonated in my bones, in roots, in the thrumming diaphragm. You hear it now? Good. Listen closer. It's not breathing around you, Cassian. He raised a hand, not in greeting, but in benediction. You're breathing with it. I woke, gasping, not for air, for silence. My hand was pressed flat against my chest, feeling my own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. But beneath it, fainter, slower, deeper, another rhythm. Thrum, thrum, thrum. Synchronized. My breath hitched. I took a deliberate inhale. The floor beneath me dipped. I exhaled. The floor rose. I wasn't just in the house. I was part of its breath. A tiny temporary lung in a vast slumbering body. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I tore the apartment apart, ripped up the thin carpet, pried at the floorboards with a butter knife, scoured the walls with a flashlight, looking for seams, for vents, for anything. Nothing, just plaster, plywood, insulation. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. It was the structure. The building was the organism, and I was inside it, like a cell, like a thought. I went to the roof, stood on the gravel surface, the city spread out below me, a glittering, indifferent nervous system of its own. Wind whipped my hair. The cold air burned my lungs. Silence, just the wind. I closed my eyes, listened. Beneath the wind, the traffic, the distant siren, there it was, faint, muffled by concrete and steel, but undeniable. Click. From the vent stack beside me, a deep, wet inhalation. The gravel beneath my feet vibrated. Thrum, thrum, thrum. I wasn't escaping. I was just moving to a different part of the lung. The final move was desperate. A cabin, deep in the woods, 2 hours north of the city. No electricity, no plumbing, just wood stove, well water, and silence. Real silence. The kind that rings in your ears. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Beth, handed me the keys. Place has been empty for years. Solid bones, though. Good bones. She said it with a smile, unaware of the chill that went down my spine. good bones. I drove through the night, the headlights cutting tunnels through the black pines. The cabin was exactly as advertised. Small, sturdy log walls, a stone chimney. Surrounded by towering firs, the air thick with the scent of pine resin and damp earth. Peace. I stepped inside. The silence was profound, deep, a physical weight. I dropped my bag, sat on the rough-hewn wooden chair, closed my eyes, listened. No traffic, no sirens, no hum of appliances, just the wind in the pines, the creak of the cabin settling, and then a soft, wet click. From the stone fireplace, a pause, then a slow, deep inhalation. The log walls groaned softly, expanding. The scent of damp earth and copper filled the small space. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The vibration traveled up the chair legs into my bones. It wasn't following me. It was the world, the cabin, the woods, the bedrock beneath the soil, all part of the same vast, slumbering thing. I walked to the fireplace, knelt, pressed my ear to the cold stone. The click was louder here, closer. Then the breath, a long, shuddering draw that seemed to pull the air from my own lungs, and beneath it, the hum, the same deep, resonant thrum. The blue light wasn't visible here, not yet, but I could feel it, pulsing in the stone, pulsing in the roots of the trees outside, pulsing in the marrow of my own bones. I sat by the cold hearth all night, not sleeping, listening, mapping the breath. Inhale, 17 seconds. Hold, 3 seconds. Exhale, 22 seconds. Pause, 5 seconds. 67 seconds. The same, always the same. At dawn, weak gray light filtering through the dusty window, I knew there was no escape, no silence to find. The breath wasn't in the houses. The houses were in the breath. The city was built on its bones. The woods grew from its skin. And I was just a flicker of consciousness in its vast, dreaming mind. A thought it was having, a memory it was replaying. The real, deep in the thorax of the world, spinning on, storing names, storing lives, storing me. As the first rays of sun touched the pine tops, I walked outside. The air was crisp, clean, smelling of frost and resin. I stood in the clearing, closed my eyes, took a deep breath. The forest held its breath with me. I exhaled. The trees sighed. Thrum, thrum, thrum. I opened my eyes, looked down at my hands. The cut on my palm, the one from the mug, was gone. In its place, etched into the skin, faint but clear, like a brand made of fine blue light, were 2 words. Breathe deep. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. I tilted my head back, opened my mouth, and took the deepest breath I could. The world breathed with me. The cabin groaned, the pines swayed, the earth vibrated, and deep below in the chamber of black basalt, the colossal reel spun faster. The eyes in the sprocket holes blinked all at once. The scariest part isn't hearing the house breathe. It's realizing, as the rhythm syncs with your own heartbeat, as the vibration becomes the only thing holding your bones together, that the breath you're taking isn't yours. It's the world's, and it's been waiting for you to finally inhale, to finally become part of the silence, to finally join the dream, to finally remember you were never the listener. You were always the song.